Good evening, everyone. Before calling the special council meeting to order for December 11th, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we gather today and acknowledge on behalf of council and the community that the city of Pembroke resides on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We thank the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. It is with this statement that we honor and respect the Algonquins on whose land we reside. I'd call this meeting to order for a special meeting of council. At this time, I would ask that everyone please stand for an opening prayer and reflection. Before opening this meeting of council, I would ask those who wish, each in your own way, silently join in a prayer of guidance over these proceedings. Thank you. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interests? Seeing none, before we get started, just to, because it was, I believe, helpful last time, just to indicate that we will be following the procedural bylaw in terms of being respectful, in terms of the allotment of time to address different questions. And just for the benefit of the public, because last time we had some different individuals that are speaking, because we're using Zoom, I would ask that people refrain from speaking in the audience of the council chambers, because when you do, all the microphones that are in this room pick you up, and then it causes some issues. We have some different consultants and other individuals zooming in with us this afternoon, and it just makes it that much more difficult when that sort of thing goes on. So having said that, I would proceed on for the purpose of why this meeting was called, and it's for the purpose of the aquatic service in the city of Pembroke. And at this time, we have the team of a lot of staff, as well as the consultants. So I'll turn it over to staff as to who wishes to go first, because I'm sure you have it figured out.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you. For any of those who may be tuning in, my name is Angela Lochte, and I'm the treasurer for the City of Pembroke. And joining with me tonight is Mr. Brian Lewis, Director of Operations, Jordan DeRoche, Director of Parks and Recreation, and Marielle McLaughlin, Manager of Operations. So both staff and council have been working on the future of pool services at the city and the development of a new aquatics center for a number of years now. With this presentation, we are bringing together information presented in the past with additional information and speakers that will discuss both the condition of our current pool and a possible P3 initiative to provide council with more information for their consideration. So we'll look at three things tonight. Our meeting objective is to provide additional information and obtain feedback on the repair or closure of the current Kinsman pool, the construction of a new aquatic facility, or examining a P3 financed construction of a new multi-recreation complex. So in terms of tonight's agenda, we will be doing an overview of the current pool, and with us tonight is Tashi. How do you pronounce Tashi's name?
Mr. Tashi Dwavidi.
Thank you. With HP Engineering, who has done a structural review of the current Kinsman pool. We're going to be looking at what are some different options for consideration of the current pool. We'll be looking at the options for the pool's replacement, and also joining us tonight is Andrea Finley, who is the Managing Director of Colliers, who will be holding a discussion and Q&A on different P3 options available to the city. All right, Jordan, you're next.
All right, thank you, Angela. I'm just going to provide a little bit of background on the Kinsman pool. I know that it has been highlighted in some of the past reports, but the Kinsman pool was originally constructed in 1956 as an outdoor pool. In 1972, the pool area was enclosed with a pre-engineered butler building. Between 1972 and 1977, the pool underwent extensive renovations, which included complete dismantling of the butler building to undergo the replacement of the structure's foundation, as well as the support columns. In 2016, a structural review recommended the replacement of wall and roof structures, with a follow-up reviews in 2018 as well as 2021. These reviews strongly recommended the immediate replacement of the roof panels, wall panels, and girts of the pool enclosure. So during this time, the recommended work has not been completed, with the pool maintenance and repairs occurring only on an emergency basis due to its possible replacement. I also wanted to highlight one other thing too with some of the work that we've been working towards with respects to replacing the facility. So we had some grant application opportunities that were made in 2019 and 20, as well as 2022 and 2023, which we hope to provide funding for replacement, but we were unsuccessful. In 2023, the city had pre-qualified a short list of vendors to design build a new aquatic facility, but had been unable to obtain financial support from partners to help finance the project.
So in 2023, Tashi from HP Engineering was hired to perform an updated structural review of the Kinsman pool. The report recommends that the city consider closing the facility to the public until proper rehabilitation work is completed. In further discussions with the consultant, there may be an opportunity to keep the pool open with active monitoring to keep the pool open in the short term. The report recommends a series of immediate repairs required to the structure, along with additional work required in the next 2 to 5 years. These works would provide an estimated useful life of 25 to 40 years, and a detailed list can be found in Annex A. For the remediate works, at an estimated cost of $1.1 million, would include the pool enclosure structure, so the replacement of the roof, walls, and localized repairs of the pool enclosure columns and beams. And for the administration building, seal and replace the roof and replacement of drywall ceiling in the men's change room, and a guardrail replacement on the entrance ramp. And then the works in the next 2 to 5 years at an estimated cost of $308,000 would be repair and replace the end wall of the pool enclosure and repairs to the entrance canopy, the retaining wall, and the concrete walls and floors of the administration building. So we do have Tashi here to kind of answer any questions we may have at this point regarding the existing facility, and any questions you may have now as opposed to waiting to the very end.
So is there any questions from members of council for Tashi? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, it's just easier to say it, call you by your first name.
Okay.
Seeing none.
Tashi, maybe I can ask one. Just can you give us an idea of what the active monitoring is and what that may entail?
Yeah, I can get into it. I mean, our letter sort of recommended, we had some discussions earlier. So I guess from our perspective, just to paint a bit of background, I mean, we have been inspecting this structure since 2016, every couple of years. So in 2016, we had recommended some pretty extensive work, which is also being reflected currently, but it's, I mean, the work hasn't been done and the deterioration is getting worse. I mean, the one that we're concerned about the most would probably be the roof and wall panels. It's basically like a prefabricated panel, and there's girts and purlins supporting it, and they're in pretty deteriorated condition. So those are the things we want to focus on. So in terms of active monitoring, I think if we want to go the route of keeping the pool open, say in the interim while we're trying to do some repairs, I mean, I wouldn't advocate keeping it open for another long period of time and monitoring it. This would be something sort of relatively short term. Would be, I think currently we're maintaining, we're trying to keep snow off the roof. We'd probably want to go a little bit further because the condition we've observed, it's not something we can sit there and say, yeah, you know, you have 5 years life left in it, you can, you know, it'll withstand this load. Well, it's in pretty deteriorated condition, so we could have some issues, you know, coming up without much warning. So I think from our perspective, if we want to keep this pool open and operating, the active monitoring would basically include, when actually people are using the pool in it, we probably want someone just sort of monitoring sort of the roof area. We're not too concerned about a collapse that would occur suddenly without warning. We'd probably have some warning, but it'd just be more of a fail-safe to avoid anything happening. Now, is that going to prevent something from happening? Probably not, but it would at least give us a bit of prior warning so we're not caught off guard. So that's the basic active monitoring, if you will, and other things too in terms of we'd like to sort of have a little bit more control during extreme weather events. If we're predicting sort of a storm with high winds and stuff, it's probably not the best idea to have the pool open at that time. I mean, it's quite possible people wouldn't be using it anyways, but those sort of things. I think right now with this, we're thinking sort of snow, rain, high winds, those sort of things, we'd probably want to not have the pool open, or at least not occupied with people in that area. So That's kind of what our ideas were for sort of an active monitoring.
Thank you.
So are there any additional questions for Tashi at this time, or? We're good? Okay. Well, thank you very much. So at this point, obviously, there are, a number of options to consider. So we could consider the immediate repair of the building, looking at those immediate items that were worth roughly $1.1 million, and continue our track of replacing this pool with an aquatic center. So this would certainly allow us to, continue to have a facility for residents. I guess the con with this approach is it is a costly repair for possibly a short-term need. But as we'll see in later slides, when you compare that to how much a one year's worth of a loan repayment is on a new facility, I mean, it's comparable, if not cheaper, to repair the existing building and keep it open for a few more years while we work on an alternative. Certainly, another option to consider is just to fully repair, cover all the recommendations that are in the report, which are estimated at $1.4 million. So the pros to this approach would be, we're going to get greater value for dollars spent and look at possibly delaying the replacement of the pool, to the next term of council, in the years 2030 or beyond. And there are additional items that we could do in this case because currently the structure is deteriorating due to a lack of HVAC and dehumidification, which would cost another roughly $800,000 if we wanted to extend the life of the building even further. We should definitely be looking at something, to add to the scope of work to extend the life of that nature. And finally, another option to consider would be just to close and demolish the current pool and continue on with its replacement. So to demolish this building would cost roughly $300,000. We would save net of revenues roughly $312,000, but would have probably some additional considerations and costs related to severance pay, possible union bumping and that kind of thing. So this would allow the city to save for several years while a new pool is being built. But the downside to that is certainly the loss of service to the public, as well as the loss of staff with aquatic experience, which means a ramp up to a reopening of a new pool will definitely take longer. Did you want to add anything to that, Jordan?
I think the only thing that I would like to add is just that if we are to repair the costs without dehumidification, we're looking at extending the life of the building to about 25 years. If we do look at dehumidification, we're looking at upwards to 40 to 50 years of extending its life.
So if we look at those different options with the different timelines that we're looking at, at one of the previous meetings on the pool, staff had made some recommendations to, as opposed to looking at a design build altogether, given the lack of support for funding, to split it up into two distinct parts, to tender out for a design. And then at that point, the city would be in a better position to try to obtain grant financing because the project would be considered at that point shovel ready. And then as a separate item to tender out the actual construction of the facility. And if we were to start this process now, we'd be looking at occupancy possibly at the end of 2027. Certainly, an option that's being discussed amongst members of council right now is to look at a possible P3 partnership or other alternate solution. So we will be discussing this in a bit more detail, but this does add an extra timeline to the project in terms of preparing a market sounding report and selecting a proponent to then move ahead with the design build. So this would add likely an extra year onto a possible new facility. Certainly, if we're to make immediate repairs to Kinsman Pool, because we're talking about the building envelope, we would need to close the pool to conduct these repairs. And certainly, if we were looking to try to save money and just close and demolish the existing facility, we would be looking at not providing pool services to residents for anywhere between 3 to 4 years at a minimum. So at this point in time, staff's recommendation for the Kinsman pool is that if we want to operate this facility for 2024 and beyond, we must undertake immediate repairs to this facility to mitigate risk. And if council is considering the permanent closure of the pool at all, then we recommend to make this a key issue to be discussed at the 2024 public budget meeting, which is currently scheduled for January 15th at 6 p.m. So Jordan is so we have obviously been working on this project for a number of years now. And in 2019, we did hire an external consulting company, Forum Research, to gauge community support for a new aquatic facility. And Jordan is going to walk us through the results of that information.
Did staff want questions throughout or at the very end, or how are you wanting to? Got any preferences? Let me put it that way.
It would be easier for staff if it was at the end, but we have kind of compartmentalized the presentation. So if council does have a question regarding the section we're just leaving, then it might be easier for council to ask them then.
Okay, so if we can have some questions now at what we've covered thus far before getting into the research. So I have Councillor Frenier, Councillor Keel.
Thank you. So I have two questions for Jordan. Cost to dehumidify, I don't believe that's covered here. You touched on that. So the fact that if we were to do something about dehumidification in the building, it may extend it to 40 years. Can you explain that, or is there costing for that?
Yeah, through the chair. So basically from the information that was provided to us, it's basically just to repair the structural. But we got looking into part of the reason why we are in the situation that we are today is because we have that lack of dehumidification. So if we were to look at dehumidification in HVAC and we wanted to extend the life beyond the 20-25 years, that would be a consideration. And we did estimate, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Lewis, I think it was actually 600,000.
Through you, Mr. Chair, 600,000. You throw in some project management that may need be required and some design between $600,000 and $800,000, and some additional delay to getting the pool opened back up again. Dehumidification is a mechanical component, and unfortunately, in the last few years, mechanical components of any nature have been difficult to get our hands on. So there could be additional delay. That's not saying that we couldn't put the building envelope, replace the building envelope, put the building back together again, and then have a separate stage of dehumidification that comes in later. But it could mean closing the pool more than once to get that dehumidification set up.
Thank you. Yeah, so the fact that we could extend the life of the pool for 40 years for $2 million sounds really attractive to me right now. That being said, I think there's a lot of things that have to happen, yeah, tonight, this meeting, before we get there, because I know there's other options on the table. I still think that's, like, $2 million is not as large as obviously 42 million for a new pool. It's far from that, but I mean, funding would be another thing we'd have to talk about later, so. Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Keel?
So just to confirm, because we've been talking for months now about a $42 million pool. If we spend $2.2 million, am I hearing correctly that we have a pool until the year 2065? Like, is that what we're being suggested?
I'll start and then I'll pass it over to
Subject to, I'm
Mr.
assuming,
Lewis.
other maintenance along the way. But.
So the structure could last as long as that because the current building has lasted as long as that, and we're essentially looking to replace the entire building envelope with this, with these immediate repairs that we need to undertake, but it does not consider the, electrical mechanical guts of the building, which would, require replacement at different times, over the next 40-year period. So it does not include that. And I believe Mr. Lewis may have more comments on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and just further to Madam Treasurer's comments, the building envelope will last another 20 to 25 years. If we put dehumidification into the system, the existing structure, the new structure, steel structure won't deteriorate like it has up to now, so it could last upwards of 40 years. But as Madam Treasurer has mentioned, that doesn't include the rest of the components within the building. There's a significant number of components in the building that would still continue to deteriorate. They're already old. So with operations and maintenance, yes, we're going to extend the life of those as well, so you're going to get a much longer period of time. You're still going to get a like-for-like building. Let me rephrase that. You're still going to have the existing facility. So there are some inherent issues with the existing building. It's an old model, so to speak. It's not going to have some of the other components that a new facility would entail. And when the discussion of replacing the existing Kinsman pool with a new aquatic facility, there was a drive to add in programming and add in other spaces and so forth to improve the lack of office space that's there now, to improve on the lack of change room space and some issues within the change rooms and those type of things wouldn't be addressed if we just put a new enclosure over the existing basin. So yes, in answer to your question, Councillor Keel, yes, we could extend the life of the existing structure, but it wouldn't be over. It's not like we could do it and walk away again.
So what, have we looked at what those future timeline and estimated costs are going to be?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is a building condition assessment that was done. I'm trying to recall, I believe it was 2014. I don't have a copy of it with me. I'm not sure if Ms. McLaughlin can speak to anything further on the building condition assessment. But as Madam Treasurer says, there's mechanical systems that would have to be looked at. There's electrical that has to be looked at. There's a number of different things that would be included in that building condition assessment that would need to be addressed as we moved forward. It wouldn't be the last capital project in the near future, if I can say it that way. But I don't have the building condition assessment in front of me. It's not going to be $42 million in trying to keep the existing building going, even with additional items that would have to go into it. It's going to be far from the cost of a new aquatic facility, if that helps.
Okay, and it's noted, and I do get what you're saying, and I've spoken with Mr. DeRoche that there's some issues with the present change rooms, perhaps not meeting a 2023 design requirement. Are there potentially cheaper options to rectify those over time as well in a piecemeal, maybe a building extension or something like that, that's going to continue to be cheaper than $42 million?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to add to the existing building, to add in change room space, and that's something I haven't looked into. Not saying it's not possible, but that would be a significant cost. The building wasn't built to add onto, so it would be a significant cost. I can't answer to whether or not it would be beneficial to do that or replace it.
And Madam Treasurer, how would we finance this $2.2 million option? Or what are some options we would have to finance this?
So certainly that would be something that we would discuss at budget time. Are we going to look to try to increase our taxation funding towards capital projects? Are we looking to potentially borrow some money from our aquatic center reserve to make these repairs? Are there other reserves that we could look at taking some money from to try to decrease the impact to taxation? Are we going to look at trying to cut a few capital projects out this year to try to afford it? So this is going to be one of the tough decisions that we're going to have to make if this is the direction we're going to go in with our budget 2024 deliberations.
Can we debenture something like this?
We could, but we don't typically want to debenture something for longer than we're going to use the building for. but it's certainly possible.
Purcell?
Thank you, Chair. I think we have 6 different options, right? One is do nothing. We run until failure. We monitor the structure for snow loads and the wind. We put administrative controls in place, and then we decommission the facility once it becomes, a failure, and we'll save $300,000 per year. The second option is to repair, and that's the immediate repairs in terms of about the $2 million investment right now. The third one is to replace the structure only, and that's just to upgrade the building itself. So I know it's a Butler building, and we can add dehumidification, maybe a fabric roof. Also, the furnace and the heat change rooms were replaced in 2020. The pool pump was just replaced. The boilers were replaced in 2023, and the hot water tank was just replaced in 2023. So a lot of the components, and from what I'm told, is that the pool itself is structurally sound. The pool, the water cavity holding pool structure. So, that's another option. The fourth would be to build like for like. So not a $43 million build, but a build that just actually builds like for like, reducing the cost in terms of the pool. The fifth option is the $43 million build with the extras incorporated. And 6 would be a P3, expand the project, including 2 ice surfaces, a pool, and a library. Back in September, staff had provided an asset management report. The asset management report, and I don't like doing these in isolation. I know we're here to talk about the pool, but we need to look at the other facilities that we own, because we're into the same type of issues in terms of the PACC and the Pembroke Memorial Center. So currently, the age of the PACC is 46 years of age. It's built in 1977. It's probably got about $5.5 million worth of work to be performed on it. Our PMC is built in 1951. It's 72 years of age. It's got about a capital requirement of about $11.5 million, and right now it's deemed in fair condition. But that's just to keep it up and running for the next 20 years. So there's significant investments that have to be happened, and not only that, we have an aging library as well, with major investments going in terms of roofing and windows and those kinds of things. So for our audience here today, a 1% increase is about $220,000 in revenue. So a 1% tax increase is $220,000. So just so you're aware, in terms of the dollars that we're talking about through levy increases, it's a significant levy increase to cover some of these costs if we don't have partnerships. Currently, we have 0 partnerships. Nobody's coming to the table to assist, which is concerning. We can't do it alone. So there's going to be some hard decisions that we need to make, because I understand that everybody is, times are tough. Everything has gone up in terms of the costs. Look at in terms of building a facility, the costs are ridiculous. But also are the operations to the city of Pembroke, just to do our day-to-day operations. So what I'm getting at is that we have some decisions to make. We don't have one decision to make. We have probably 6 different, opportunities that exist in front of us. So I think what we need to do is kind of look at, okay, what makes sense? Knowing that we don't have the partnerships, we don't have a commitment from the provincial government, the federal government in terms of grants. Can we repair? If it makes sense, I would say, I would consider maybe repair, but also maybe there's an opportunity right now to look at something different. Look outside the box and look at different construction projects and how they're being managed right now. And P3 may be an opportunity to look at replacing the pool, 2 ice surfaces, and our aging library. So, do I have all the answers? No, I don't. Is this a good news story? Potentially, it could be. Right now, it's a difficult decision that this council has to make in terms of what we're going to do. So I think we need to hear a little bit more about the opportunities that are ahead of us, such as the P3 model. maybe even building like for like, or even just looking at getting an estimate in regards to replacing the structure only, like the total replacement of the structure. It's a Butler building, it was placed over top of the pool. Is that something that we can look at going forward as well? Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for confirmation to you, Madam Treasurer, or Mr. DeRoche, the 1.1 million repair cost, how long would the pool be, that's for immediate repair, how long would it be closed for? Would it be closed for that repair period? And how long would it be closed for?
So through the chair, so what we estimate is the pool would remain open during the procurement.
Okay,
We would estimate between 3 to 4 months that the pool would be closed for the repairs. And then it's a matter of continuing on with operations after that. So just ensuring that we have the lifeguards in place.
okay. And maybe I missed it earlier. Did one of the councillors ask, so if we spend 1.1 million, how many more years could we keep it operational?
So if we spend that amount, that would extend the life of the building for 25 years.
20
To 25 years.
to 25 years. Okay. The pool, like Councillor Keel was asking Mr. Lewis, like the change rooms and that, they're not modern. They're old, and you talk about accessibility issues, and there's not enough. The staff don't have an office. They have an office, but the staff don't have a proper change room. There's not a proper equipment room. It's been modified, right? The pool. So the pool is important to the community, but we have to look at the whole picture. The figures in the October report that the treasurer brought forward for the asset management update of the 3 facilities, the pool, PEMICE 2, and the PMC, were pre-COVID dollars. And we know the pool multiplied by 1.5, so those figures are more money now. So we have to look at the whole situation here. It's a tough decision. But the P3 is an option to, I know you're going to come with a report with it, but the P3 is an option to explore, build like-for-like pool, PMC replacement, possible library, second ice pad. So the 1.1 million, keep it open temporarily is something to consider. But I still want to consider the P3 Sportsplex option too. Thank you.
So, so I see staff wants to comment, but if I can, just to get some confirmation in terms of the basin part as well, and then Mr. Lewis, I see you wanted to have a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and great comments from council so far, and we anticipate some more throughout the rest of the presentation. So there is additional information in the presentation that we're going to provide, including the consultant is with us this evening to talk about the P3 options and has some information regarding that. But I wanted to just clarify for Councillor Purcell, the intent of replacing the Butler building, basically let's lift the Butler building off and put a new Butler building in place. We're almost there with the recommendations that we've received from the structural engineer. By replacing the building envelope, we would be in essence replacing it. The columns that are there right now may need some minor repairs, but the columns would stay in place and the beams would stay in place, so basically the truss portion. And the rest of the building envelope would be removed and put back in. So in the discussion thus far, we are in essence taking the Butler building off and putting a new one in place is what we've talked about. That's correct. Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be the building envelope itself, roughly about $1.1 million. Another, I believe it was $300,000 to do some other works that is required in the next 2 to 5 years. It might be more cost effective, economies of scale, and you've got a shutdown at the pool already. If you're replacing the building envelope, you might want to do those other $300,000 worth of works at the same time while it's already there. And then to do dehumidification and HVAC improvements, another $600,000 to $800,000 is what we're looking at right now.
And the basin.
The basin itself, is in relatively good shape. I'm not aware of any issues that have happened with the basin. We do keep an eye on the basin because there is maybe a spring underneath the existing basin. So we want to make sure that it stays where it needs to stay. But the basin itself is in relatively good condition and we haven't had any issues with it.
Councillor Keel, and then we'll turn it back to Ms. Lochte.
So if we were to do option number 2 for the 25 to 40-year project, how long do we think the pool would be down for?
So through the chair, we'd estimate that it'd be down 3 to 4 months. That would be actually closed. So the entire length of the project with procurement, I think we were thinking 9 to 10 months. And like I mentioned before, we would remain open during the procurement and then would be shut down and closed to do the repairs.
Is there a time of year that the patrons would prefer that closure be, or?
That's a good question. I mean, not in particular. I mean, we're busy with programming all the way through the year, right? So if we're going to look at what we're going to, or when we're going to close down, I think it would just follow suit with our procurement. When we can actually get in there and close down the facility itself.
Okay, so community support. So knowing that the condition of the current Kinsman pool, the city had engaged a forum research to examine community support for the pool itself and a possible replacement. So Mr. DeRoche will be reviewing the results of that study.
All right, thank you, Madam Treasurer. So in 2019, we did have some research that was completed for a project that primarily focused on the feasibility and development of a community aquatic and wellness facility based out of Pembroke. So the research was conducted through 401 telephone and 812 online surveys that were completed in July of 2019. And we had 67% of respondents that lived in the city of Pembroke, with the remaining 33% in the township of Laurentian Valley. Almost 2/3 of the residents were interested in using the new facility, with 77% approving of the Kinsman facility update. So key findings, which we pulled from the report, are on the next couple slides. So the first one that I want to talk about here is, I guess, the question of importance of a pool to the community and what that looks like. So if you take a look at very important, you'll see that the online respondents were very high. It was 84%, and the telephone ones were 51%. So just wanted to make note, too, that those aged 35 to 44 think having a community pool is more important, and 80% of those folks had mentioned that. Next slide, please. The approval of a new facility. So once again, when we take a look at strongly approved, we'll see that 78% of the online respondents were very high. And then when we take a look at the telephone ones, that was 52% as well. Next slide, please. Question being, would residents use a new facility? So again, when we take a look at very likely, the online respondents were very high with 72%. The telephone were a little bit lower at 27%, but I want to draw some attention to some of the comments on the right-hand side where it says those aged 25 to 34, which is 70%, and 35 to 44, 74% are most interested. And households with children under 19, so 73%, and both children's and mature age adults, 50%, are interested. So when we take a look at the 73%, 74%, and 70%, what that speaks to me is basically, young families with young children, they want to have drowning prevention and awareness, and they want their kids to swim. Thank you.
So Franny, before we move to the next section?
Yeah, before we move to the next section. So there's an online component and there's a telephone component. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the telephone component is the interviewees, so the organization we hired makes phone calls through the community. So they are reaching out to individuals who might not necessarily use the pool. They're just randomly. The online, however, I do believe the person taking the survey has to make the effort. Am I correct? Therefore, probably 100% of the people that actually reach out, or almost, are the ones that want the pool. someone who really doesn't care one way or the other isn't going to go online and go out of their way to fill out a survey. So these numbers really don't represent how willing the residents of Pembroke are to pay 42 million for a pool. So, you know, forgive me, but I'm going to take these figures with a grain of salt, because, I mean, if you're happy with something and you don't really care about something, you're not going to go out of your way, you know, to pursue filling out a survey. If you want something bad, you're going to do it. So that's what these numbers show. The interest was low by phone, because maybe you're just calling maybe someone who never uses the pool anyway. The people that are reaching out are the ones that really want the pool. And not to say they're not important, they are very important. However, what we need to decide at this table tonight is, what can the residents of Pembroke afford? No one else, because no one else has come to the table as of today. So that's what we have to keep in mind also when we're looking at the PS3. I think that this is the time for residents in other communities, if they strongly want a pool, to go to their councils, advocate to their municipal leaders that they want to feel like a full partner in this project, not just a poor cousin. And I hate to put it like that, but that's kind of, you know, this is almost an insult to a lot of individuals that live in those communities that probably say, you know what, I wouldn't mind if we paid towards the new pool because we use the pool. So the municipal leaders have to listen to those individuals. And, you know, just like we're here tonight to try to work for the best interest of the Pembroke residents, those individuals should be advocating towards their municipal leaders to say, we really want a regional facility and we want to be full partners so that we have a right, we have a say in that pool. So, and that's my rant. So I'm just saying that when it comes to phone surveys and online, I don't think it's worth the paper. So, sorry, thank you.
Councillor Keel?
I'm just going to pick up where Councillor Frenier just was, because she beat me to it, and that is to say that not only my experience, but my undergraduate degree tells me that a poll can be made to produce any result, and I agree with that thought. The one thing that none of the people in this poll had was a $42 million price tag attached to it. And they had no information with respect to what that would do to their taxes or what that's going to do to other city facilities. So, not that I don't appreciate being given these numbers, but from my perspective, you know, these numbers are about as useful as the 3 people that come up to me in Walmart and say, I want a pool, and the 2 people that come up to Walmart and say, I've never used a pool in my life and I don't want to pay for it with my tax dollars. So I certainly appreciate having this former study, but I think at the end of the day, knowing the fact that anyone who was answering, whether they were from Pembroke or not, certainly didn't have the price tag attached to it. And I'm glad to see at least one of our media members are here today, and I know others pick up on the video afterwards. But I think the broader discussion needs to be not just do we want a pool, because I think most people would like to live in a community with a pool. I think today's meeting is more importantly, how do we get to having a pool, and how efficiently can we do it, whether it's using taxpayer money, whether it's using federal grants. I mean, we're looking at the whole gambit. But I don't know, I get the sense from my colleagues around the table that we all want to see a pool open in Pembroke. The question is how do we get there?
Okay. Back to you, Ms. Lochte.
Okay. To recap what we have done to date, so in May of 2021, the city retained Colliers through a competitive process to act as a project management consultant to oversee the various aspects of the project, such as due diligence management, procurement documents, and project management during construction. In November of 2022, the city retained BNP Goldie to complete a campaign planning and feasibility study of the area's capacity for fundraising. Surveys and interviews were conducted with local businesses and key stakeholders, and the study approximates that the local capacity for fundraising for this facility is upwards of $2 million. In February of 2023, the architect that completed the initial site concept plans completed prospective renderings to be used as part of project discussion materials as well as for inclusion in funding applications. In June of 2023, an expression of interest notice was issued to establish a list of interested local and surrounding subcontractors and suppliers to be included in the design RFP for the new facility. In June of 2023, we also did a pre-qualification request for proposals was issued. The document closed with 6 proposals received. The proposals were reviewed and scored, with the intent being that the top 4 would proceed to the next stage, which was a submission of a design build proposal. In August of this year, a third-party consultant completed a Class D estimate for the facility. This estimate was based on the current building configuration that was established during the city staff meetings with the PM consultant, based on room data sheets and facility space requirements. The Class D estimate for a full aquatic complex, including replacement of the existing pool, development of an outdoor park and splash pad, as well as the addition of a new therapeutic pool, gymnasium, and supporting public spaces, was $45.1 million. And Class D estimates are intended to have an accuracy range of about plus or minus 25%. The total spent today on this project is $290,000, with roughly $740,000 of reserve funds available for the construction of a new facility. So as part of these works, we also did a review of site locations. An evaluation and assessment was completed of possible sites for the new aquatic facility. The 4 sites that were considered under this evaluation were Cecilia Street, which is the location of the existing facility, Riverside Park, the southern border of the park when you just first entered, the area on your right, Bennett Street, the pine tree area adjacent to the existing PACC, and Bell Street, which is located adjacent to Fellows High School on lands located in the township of Laurentian Valley. Under this high-level evaluation, the following criteria were evaluated: location, existing land uses, proximity to the existing infrastructure of water, sanitary, and storm, existing site conditions and assessment that may be required at each site, whether it needed SARS, due diligence, geotechnical investigations, existing traffic conditions, accessibility for users by driving, walking, or cycling, the proximity to existing recreational and cultural amenities, and the proximity to existing facilities with potential users, seniors, schools. So after this was done, we came back to council for direction on which of the current site to go with. And the advantages of the selected site was that the proximity to residential areas, community schools, and potential user groups, proximity for access to and from the Algonquin Trail, the low risk of soil contamination and species at risk with the site being previously developed. So direction was provided by council in October of 2022 to proceed with the aquatic center on the Cecilia Street existing location. So should the city wish to change direction and move forward with a large mega recreational complex, a new site selection evaluation would have to be completed on any of the potential locations. One suggestion location for the large recreation complex has been the industrial park. This location was not reviewed as part of the original location analysis. And the industrial park has been suggested as it is the only large vacant city-owned property that could fit a complex of this anticipated size.
So in step with examining options, both within the complex itself in terms of the amenities that a new aquatic facility would have, and this best site suited for such a facility, the municipality has engaged with some of its potential stakeholders and project partners over the past several years. And a list of our potential stakeholders and partners is listed here, which include the Township of Laurentian Valley, Whitewater Township, and the Town of Petawawa. In addition, other partners can include the county, the college, the Algonquins of Greater Golden Lake, the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan, Care for the municipality of Alamance Island, as well as general fundraising from the public. So this project has been discussed with key stakeholders a number of times, including the Township of Laurentian Valley, as well as Whitewater Township and the Town of Petawawa, to obtain design input and or seek just general support for this project. So while some stakeholders have provided input into the features of the new facility and provided letters of support for grant applications, no financial commitments have been made. And at our last meeting with Laurentian Valley, they indicated that further feedback on financial support would only be made once the city decides to move forward with the project. As well as mentioned by Ms. McLaughlin, the capacity for fundraising for this project has been estimated at $2 million. So as we look towards additional considerations for the project, due to the lack of financial partnership to date, it has been suggested by staff that the city kind of change tactics and consider a separate design then build process. So the estimated costs for this approach would be roughly $120,000 for project management and approximately $400,000 for shelf-ready designs. And this could be included as part of our 2024 budget. Due to the high cost of the aquatic center, something the city can certainly consider is splitting the design into 2 construction phases. And when I look at this project, I hear the voice of my Uncle Jack in my head. Now, my Uncle Jack was a real character. And what he would say to me is, the problem we have here is we have champagne taste on a beer budget. So we certainly have put a lot of other nice to have features into this facility, including a gymnasium, some community space, a therapeutic pool. But perhaps we should separate these 2 items and consider replacing, building a new aquatic center in 2 phases. So phase 1 would be the replacement of a more modernized like-for-like pool, better change rooms, better staff space, and then look at kind of encapsulating the extra features that we'd like to see in the building into phase 2. We could then move forward with a phase 1 replacement and continue to seek grant funding for the phase 2 expansion. And with the design in place, the project would be considered shovel-ready, and the city would be in a better position to apply for the highly competitive grant opportunities that are out there, because there's a lot of municipalities battling for a very small pot of money. The revised Class D estimate for phase 1 was evaluated by staff, and staff felt that it could be reduced to roughly $31.7 million, plus or minus 25%. And this reduced budget would still include some of the exterior park features contemplated, including a splash pad, the skating rink, the ball diamond, a walking path, and benches. But certainly that is something that could also be scaled down to further scale down the cost of the project. Certainly, if the city was to move forward with a phase 1 construction, there would still be time to negotiate agreements with other municipalities and fundraise during the construction phase. So at the beginning of the project, the city would need to apply for construction financing for the full project, but if partnerships committed funding during the construction phase, this would decrease the amount of long-term financing that the city would have to obtain for the project, which we only finalize at the very end of construction. So that's 6 months after we obtain substantial completion on the project. Certainly, if we were to move forward with a new facility, we would need to re-examine user fees. And if negotiations with other municipalities fail, a fallback position for the city could be to initiate out-of-town fees based on the actual costs of the new facility, which would look at both the operating costs as well as the financing costs of the project, and provide preferred registration to residents only. So in this approach, it would be up to neighboring municipalities to determine whether or not to refund the difference in fees. And an example of this is occurring right now in the town of Arnprior, where residents have 1 week to register for programs before registration is open to other neighboring communities. So in the neighboring township of McNabb-Braeside, they refund the difference between in-town and out-of-town rates, although the preferred registration is not very popular, and it's certainly not something that's well supported in the community right now. So I know there have been questions regarding financing of the project and what this means in terms of the city's debt, in terms of the city's annual debt repayment obligations. How much a levy increase would the city be looking at, and where does this put our level of risk in terms of the amount of debt the city would have to take on to finance such a project, even if we did go with just a phase 1, phase 2 approach? So the next 2 slides outline some numbers. So apologies, it is something of a wall of numbers, but I'll go through it in a bit more detail. So the first 3 columns is if we separated the project into 2 phases. So the middle column, phase 1 mid, is the staff updated cost for a scaled down project with the plus or minus 25% on either end, with the final column being the full project, phase 1 and phase 2 all together. So if the city was to receive no support from any other parties, and we only could receive $2 million in fundraising, the city would need to finance anywhere from $21 to $43 million. Our annual debt repayments, if we're looking at a 4.5% interest rate over 30 years, would be anywhere from $1.3 to $2.6 million of debt repayment that would be required from the city every year. We have been, over the past several years, building funding into the budget to help in anticipation of a future debt repayment. So we currently have built into our budget right now $255,000. Currently, this money is being put into reserve. So this would leave a funding gap of anywhere from $1 million to $2.3 million. This would mean property taxes would need to increase. The levy supported budget would need to increase anywhere from $4.6 to $10.3 million. And the debt level of risk, currently the city is in a low level of risk in terms of the amount of debt we currently have. This project will push us into the moderates. If we move forward with both phases together, would put us into the high level of debt before we consider the arenas and other debt we might need. So this moderate and high only would consider the town line force main and the water tower that we're currently looking at, but nothing else beyond that. And certainly we would still have likely some other debt we would need to incur related to the arenas in the future. So if the city did receive funding of 30% net of construction costs through partnerships, obviously this approach would be more, I think, more sustainable for the city. The debt financing required would be anywhere from $15 to $30 million. Our repayment would be anywhere from $930,000 to $1.8 million. Right now, this would leave us with a funding gap of $675,000 to $1.5 million, a levy increase of 2.93 up to 6.88, but all options would keep us in the moderate level of risk, which is likely more acceptable given the other pressures that we have with other facilities in the city. Now, I do have an analysis of our current debt repayment levels in Annex B for more information. And that brings us to an examination of our P3 option. So I'm going to pass things over to Mr. Lewis.
Okay, before we go into the P3, there's a number of different questions, and I think it's only fair. So Councillor Frenier has attended meetings of the ad hoc Aquatics Center Committee, if I can call it that for lack of a better name for it. Councillor Jackson, who is not present this evening, the Deputy Mayor, who has attended different meetings as well. And so I just want to make sure so that your report is bang on as always, it's accurate, that these are the different individuals. I want to make sure that everyone is aware that it's not for a lack of trying, that I know that I've approached different municipalities, the CAO has approached different municipalities, and it's correct in terms of no financial commitment. They have always been prepared and have executed, signed letters and support when applying for grants. They have done that. Some of the municipalities when you talk about, you know, is it like for like, what is it? Some of the municipalities represented on this committee have made comments about that it should have a Starbucks, that it should have some sort of legal size volleyball court and some other things. There's been other discussion. One mayor made a comment, and I find this interesting in this report, but it just, so that you know that there is these discussions that have happened. One mayor made reference to this preferred registration, saying, be careful what you ask for, because if there is commitment from other municipalities, do they get similar rights in terms of booking, whereas if it's a city-owned facility, and there is no commitments, the city of Pembroke has preferred booking rights for city residents, so that comment came out. So it just so that you have a full flavor in terms of those meetings, and then I'm just going to throw in a question and a comment. Is something that I've said throughout, is that if there is no design, and Mr. CAO has said this before, without a design, you don't get to be fruitful in applying for grants, number one. And number two, difficult to fundraise, because what are you fundraising for? Because no one has something tangible what you're fundraising for. My question for you, Ms. Lochte, is in terms of your two breakouts in terms of the numbers and so forth, and you got debt refinancing and funding gaps and how it would happen, fundraising, partnerships, but in both analysis, there is no grant numbers in there, correct? Or am I missing them?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, so now let's turn it over to some questions on this one. So I have Councillor Frenier, I have Councillor Keel.
So these are not a surprise to me, these numbers, because I've been going through these numbers for quite some time now, and that's why I know that the Pembroke residents cannot pay for this facility alone. And yes, I've attended many meetings with leaders in other municipalities, and I was really disheartened at the last meeting, because basically the result of the meeting was that the other municipalities basically said, well, one particular municipality said, well, I'm not going to pull any punches. We're not giving any money towards the building of this complex. They said that they felt that if the city of Pembroke wants a brand new, but this, okay, I'll just step back a bit. This was after these communities said, well, you know, you need to put basketball courts in, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. And then by the end of the meeting, it's like, but don't look to us for any money. They said it should be up to us to build it, and then they'd decide later if they wanted to contribute. Well, you know what? If I want to buy a $100,000 vehicle and someone else wants to drive it with me to share it, I'm not just going to go ahead and buy that vehicle unless I know for sure they're paying half. So it's kind of a ridiculous thing for anyone to say. So, and I really don't care if I offend anybody at this point, that's terrible. But you know, I want them to come back to the table. This region needs a facility that it's proud of. And it's not unlike the waste management site out in, I believe it's out in Laurentian Valley. We all shared the construction of that building. We still, to this day, pay an equal share, and I believe it's based on assessment, like most of the agreements we have with the county. This regional facility should be no different. It should be the municipalities that are using it share the loan. They go and get the financing together. They apply for grants together. Like Pembroke residents cannot take a 10.3% hike in taxes to pay for a pool that everybody's going to use. And all for the sake so that other municipalities can keep their levy increases down. Like we've been, you know, if you want services and you want pools, you have to put your taxes up. I'm sorry, it can't be only the city residents that get their taxes raised. So I am a little too close to this. I mean, I used the pool as a child. I think I was born in '57. I used the pool as a young child. My kids took swimming lessons there. My grandchildren are taking swimming lessons now. I do want a pool, but not at a 10.3% increase. And I just want to share one more thing that bothers me. Is people know the system, and non-residents that use our pool will often use an address, and I saw it posted on social media. It said, well, I use my father's address because he lives in Pembroke. So, you know, people just, I want them to come to the table and be proud of this facility and not just wait for Pembroke to lead all the time. Maybe they could build it in their municipality. Let them take the lead and build the pool, and maybe we'll think about coming to the table after it's built.
Councillor Keel and then the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you for saying that, Pat. And I mean that. It's, I mean, part of my frustration, I want to be careful here. I wish this pool had been looked at 10, 15 years ago. But at the end of the day, from my perspective, it's about just getting it done today. I can't blame the last council for not seeing COVID coming and drastic increases in construction costs. They could have never seen that coming. But we are where we are today, and this last section that our treasurer spoke about has basically focused entirely on the new $42 million pool option. I can tell you right now, I'm not voting for a $42 million new pool. I don't care to hear any more about it. As far as I'm concerned, it's off the table. And I mean that with respect to, obviously, it's a council decision, not my own. But I'm done with the $42 million pool. We can't afford it. The 10.3 or best case scenario, 6.8% tax increase, as far as I know, that's just for the pool. That's not tax increases coming from every other sector of our municipal budget. And I have a feeling that if those percentage increase get published, I think people in the community are going to scoff at that, let alone the other increases from the other aspects of the city budget. So I think at the end of the day, I think this $42 million option is this council looking for a four-leaf clover in a field. We're hoping partners are going to come to the table. We're hoping federal money is going to rain down upon us. I'm saying I want a plan that gets a new pool or the current pool working for years and not pie in the sky hopes and dreams. So at this point in time, I mean, we've already spent $290,000 on a new pool. The recommendation that I think we had was to spend another $520,000 on getting to the design stage. But then as far as I know, once we've now spent $810,000, we have the design on a shelf hoping for federal and provincial money. That doesn't get me a pool, that gets me hopes and dreams. So at the end of the day, just to be clear with everybody, as if I'm not usually quite clear, I think that unless I knew we were getting government funding, unless I knew that there were partnerships out there, I'm done hearing about a $42 million pool. We can't afford it. And I'm hoping we're going to move on to better options. And I'm not discounting that option 2 from earlier tonight, where we refurbish the current facility for the 2.1, 2.2. So I'm not saying no to a pool. I'm saying no to this $42 million pool.
Deputy Mayor.
So the Kinsman pool is very, very dear to my heart. I was a 25-year member of the Kinsman Club, and I swam in the pool like Councillor Frenier when it was no roof. And my dad's friends, Vern Czar, Merv Zebel, Bob Bromley, they all helped build the pool from scratch, right? The Kinsman Club. So it's very close to me. And I want to have a pool. I'd like to consider keeping the pool open for a while till we search out other options. And we have to think of the long term here, 30, 40, 50, 60 years down the road. We want to grow the community. So that's why, I made a motion, seconded by Councillor Plummer, November 7th, to consider the expression of interest for a P3 facility with a aquatic complex, PMC replacement, and a second ice pad. The library is debatable, that's possible. But the costing, and the reason I said P3 from my research and in talking to some industry officials was that you can save money in the long run from the taxpayer. It's not a burden on the taxes of the community. You pay a management fee, you buy some ice time, et cetera. There's different formulas, right? We'll find all this out if council decides. We already made a motion to go ahead with the expression of interest. I hope it gets finalized tonight and we get moving. If that doesn't work, then we circle back to this like for like. But we can only build what we can afford. So if we don't have the government grants and the funding, we're back to square one. I will tell you one thing, and I honestly believe this. If say we went ahead with this P3 idea, we got some responses, and we had a plan for a regional facility. Cheaper, less money to build a pool, aquatic complex, in conjunction with other buildings, one heating cooling plant, than to build it separate. We'd be more prone to get government grants, and it would be LEED certified, energy efficient, and that you'd be more prone to get government grants because that's what the province is looking for. The town of Georgina, which is the amalgamation of Keswick and Sutton, north of Toronto, they're opening a municipal, multi-use recreation complex, MURC, in January with a 25-meter pool, therapy pool, double gym, indoor walking track, activity rooms, active living space, and a Discovery Library branch for $50.2 million. So they went to no, they're using development fees. We can't do that because we're not going like near Toronto. But there's an example of a $50 million, multi-use recreational facility, which a lot of these communities are going to. So I still want to explore that, and we won't know till we find out, till we put it out there. But we have to think down the road. We can fix the pool for now, but we still have an old pool with not like I said before, you don't have the proper change rooms, equipment room, et cetera. But we have to think ahead. And so that's one thing to consider, that we won't be able to afford this, but with the P3 you might be able to. And if you build something all together with other buildings, it'd probably be less money, a scaled down version.
I understand that Councillor Plummer is participating by Zoom. Councillor Plummer, I can't see you because you're not on the screen, so I'm just going to try and remember to do this throughout the afternoon. So did you have any comments that you wish to make?
I think council's kind of really hit it on the head. Is we have to talk about affordability. And if we keep going around this pie in the sky, $42 million facility that really no one coming to the table to help support, we know that we can't fund that on the backs of the city taxpayers. So I'm of the majority of the opinion is if we look at possibly a P3 option going forward, but also understandable that it'd be good to keep the facility open because even that's going to take time for construction, procurement. So I'm of the opinion that we look for repairs in the nature to keep the existing pool open, and we look to the future for a new facility to fulfill the needs of the rest of Pembroke. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think everyone's asked questions. Did you want to move to the next section, P3?
Okay, so that brings us to examining a P3 option. So given the high cost of the project that has been examined thus far and the lack of partnerships, questions have been raised about, other options that are out there to support projects of this nature, perhaps expanded. So Mr. Lewis will be taking us through some points on that.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. So I was in front of committee not long ago, a week ago, I believe, presented a report on P3 options. Was asked to come back with some more information and that there was some questions, and understanding that there was some questions regarding P3 and how they operate. I've invited our consultant. Andrea's with us online. So I'm going to go through a couple slides first, and then we'll give Andrea an opportunity to speak and help explain P3s. So the P3 idea came to staff based on the condition of the PMC and the PACC. We talked briefly about the library and the condition of the library and the age of the library. So the thought of a mega recreation project or a multiplex type project came out, and potentially doing it through a 3P type program. And that mega complex could have site features that include the aquatic facility that we've been talking about, an ice arena with 2 ice surfaces, potentially the library, and that's a significantly expanded scope over what we've been talking about. Generally, the thought of locating one is the industrial park. That was the location, and that location is large enough, the industrial park and the Transcan Corporate Park. It's large enough to house a large-scale complex like this. We do understand it's not within walking distance for many residents. There may be an impact to the downtown and the PBIA if we move the PMC out of that location and move it to another location. It was solely due to the size, the anticipated size of the facility and the city-owned property that we have. The impact on other city operations would also have to be considered if we're considering a P3 multiplex type complex. Currently, the Parks and Recreation staff, they rotate between the summer works and the parks and the winter facility maintenance and the rink maintenance. So outsourcing arena operations would likely create staffing difficulties, or additional cost could be associated. The city is currently developing a recreation master plan. That recreation master plan is scheduled to be completed in August of 2024. And that report will likely have critical information and input on the development of future facilities, thinking the arenas specifically. So P3 partnerships generally have a profit motivation, and the city would need to incur costs to support a partnership. So depending on the terms of the agreement, and as council has heard, that there is various different terms and arrangements that could be made. This may include guaranteed rental hours at market rates, could mean loan guarantees, could mean a number of different things depending on the arrangement made with the P3 developer. The city would also need to assume operation and maintenance of the building after the term of the deal. So after 20 years, we would end up with this building. And we would need to continue to operate and maintain that building after the fact. The impact of P3 rental rates on the community and the demand is an important consideration. Users may not have the ability to pay the higher rates, pushing rentals outside of the community and forcing the city to subsidize the rates. P3 partnerships with a privately operated, owned and operated facility or a facility of this nature generally operate in a profit. Their rental rates are different than our rental rates. So the city may need to consider that we'd have to purchase a bulk package of rental hours and then potentially sell those back to our users, our regular users, at a much reduced rate, which would increase the cost to the corporation. So for example, primetime rates for the Kavanaugh Sensplex in West Carleton, $340 an hour as compared to the city's current rate. And the city's current rate right now for minor hockey is $117 an hour. So there's a significant difference in cost there. So if council wishes to consider a P3, and given the complexities of the P3, it has been recommended that a market sounding be conducted to confirm that an alternate project delivery method and expanded scope is appropriate for this project. And my recommendation at the last meeting was to engage Colliers project leaders, Colliers International, to do market sounding. The cost of the market sounding would be approximately $40,000 plus approximately $2,000 in disbursements. And we already have the Aquatic Center Reserve that could cover that. And then assuming that a collaborative project delivery model is suitable to the needs of the community and the corporation, after we got the results of the market sounding, then we could commence the next step. So the next step, an EOI, an RFPQ, or an RFP, depending upon how much information we got back from that market sounding. The next step could vary in how it looks. We could go straight to request for qualifications of interested parties, go into an RFP process and start getting proposals. So we would move from that market sounding into the next step. The market sounding is going to give us the information we require to understand if a mega multiplex project is right for what we want to do. So the market sounding, as I had mentioned last time, the phase 1 of the market sounding would be the project initiation. So we'd confirm the scope, review our available documents, shortlist the delivery methods, do all that kind of initial work. And then we would prepare the market sounding questionnaire, background package, potential procurement models, and through Colliers, we'd contact 7 to 10 contractors or engineering architectural firms to complete the market sounding, obtain feedback on procurement models and how aspects of the project could be redefined to ensure private sector participation and to foster competition. Confidential interviews with each interested party would be conducted. Then we'd prepare and finalize a market sounding, and then Colliers would present that to council. So the other comment, and Andrea may touch on this, but before I ask Andrea to speak, I'd like to touch on it. The idea of including 2 ice surfaces to potentially replace the PACC and the PMC. And I'm not going to have the numbers correct off the top of my head, and I apologize. $17 million for the PMC, $4.5 million, I believe it was, for the PACC in the near future. We know there's significant monies that need to go into the pool, and there's been some discussion about the library. What do we do? Do we do P3? Do we include all those together? Do we keep moving forward with the facilities that we have and invest money, that type of money, into those facilities? Or do we do a big complex? Maybe we need to do a feasibility study. Maybe we need to ask somebody to help us understand if it's more feasible to continue to operate, maintain, and upgrade the existing facilities we have, or did we reach that breaking point, or are we very close to that breaking point where it's not worth it anymore? I'm sure we've all done the analysis on a vehicle. You get to a certain point with a vehicle, it's costing you more to keep it on the road than if you replace it. Maybe we need to do that type of feasibility study on our existing facilities before we move into a $50, $75, $100 million multiplex type situation. Understanding that there's advantages to it, and understanding that there's major advantages into a P3 as well. I'm just putting that out there before I turn it over to Andrea. So Andrea is going to provide, she's got some slides as well that she's going to quickly run through just to help us, everybody, understand the concept of a P3, and then we can open up to questions of Andrea.
Just a quick question, Brian, before we go to Andrea. Now that you've brought it up in regards to the considerable costs, I'm not sure if you, and I apologize that I didn't ask this question earlier to staff, do we have an idea what the financing would be on a P3 mega project on an annual basis? Are we talking $2 million per year? Are we talking $3 million per year? Do we know that? I apologize asking this right now.
Through the chair to Seheo Unra, I think we're probably best to let Andrea provide her information, and then Andrea, I'm sure you've heard that question. You may be able to give us an understanding of potentially what the corporation would have to invest annually into a multiplex. So Andrea, I'll let you take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the invitation. I've got a couple of slides here. Hopefully we've got the spectrum of procurement options. What I want to focus on now is really this question of how do you get to a new aquatic facility? So this is not focusing on the existing facility or any maintenance associated with that, but rather what could you go out to market? Where are you going to be the most successful with your procurement for this new mega facility or just a replacement of the aquatic facility, however it is that you scope the project? So a couple of things to keep in mind here. Project complexity and contractor collaboration. I'm going to focus on just a couple of different procurement options here, but just to show you, you go from design, bid, build, simple police detachment, something that's repetitive, not complex, doesn't require a lot of collaboration. You have off-the-shelf designs associated with them. It's a great procurement model. The market is comfortable with it. To construction manager, where you're hiring construction manager to manage it, design build, then into the design build finance, where you're starting to get into the P3 world, design build finance, maintain and operate, and I will go through those as well, where you're getting a little bit more complex with your projects, longer terms, the financing structure is different. You'll notice the word finance in those two particular models, and I'll explain what the payment mechanisms would look like in those particular cases. And what we're seeing a lot in the last 5 years in Canada certainly are the progressive design build model and integrated project delivery, which is a much more integrated collaborative model, but does lend itself to more complex type projects, such as the construction of the bridge in Kingston, for example, or courthouses where you need to anticipate the safety, the security of judges and judges' chambers and those types of things. So they're more complex type projects, and I'll explain them in a little bit more detail in a moment. So if we're to look at the design build finance, so the first introduction of what we would consider a P3 model here, essentially the owner, which would be the city of the facility, would contract a design build contractor, and they would be responsible for undertaking the design and the construction, obviously working with the city and your owner's engineer. And they would be essentially, excuse me, subject to rigorous performance regimes. So you can say exactly what it is that you expect out of the facility during the construction phase as well. For example, noise, dust, that sort of thing, as well as subject to holdbacks until the asset is certified by an independent certifier. The asset is privately financed, generally by a line of credit backed by a company guarantee by the design build contractor. So when you're looking at your cash flows, and I understand your discussions of sources of funding and budgets and such is in January, but when you're looking at the cash flows for the city associated with this, there is still a cost to the city, but it's based on milestone payments and specific performance specifications until the asset is constructed and ready for use. At that point, the financing would need to be repaid back, and there would be some additional costs associated with it because you'd have to cover off the design build contractor's financing costs. In this model, the operations and the maintenance is not retained by the P3 partner. It is retained by the owner. So let's say your construction takes about 3-4 years, then you've got the costs over 3-4 years that you'll need to pay back to the design build contractor. In the next model, this is where we add on the operation and maintenance. This allows you to add on about 20 or 30 years to your contract. And that's where you can spread over the capital payments to the private partner over those years. So in terms of the structure here, you have the owner, project company, has the design build contractor, and they're also responsible for the operations maintenance and seeking that debt, private financing, and equity. In some cases, the city may be, the fact that they've got an agreement with the city will reduce their costs of borrowing, which is a benefit to them as well, and you'll have some savings associated with that. You'd still be responsible for paying their financing costs. The advantages of this model is certainly being able to integrate design, build, operate, and maintain. You're getting a facility that's going to be designed and constructed with the operator already in mind. So they're going to be thinking to the long term. There'll be some cost savings associated with that because they're not just design building and then they're out. They're accountable for performance specifications throughout the life of the contract and maintaining the facility. You would get a facility back at the end of the term that is in good condition and subject to all the provisions that you would have put in the contract. So that is negotiated upfront, so you know exactly what you're going to get back at the end of the term. So they're not just walking away and wiping their hands from it. There are those provisions that are incentivizing the life cycle investments during the operating and maintenance period. So the financing structure, as I mentioned, for the capital side of things would be some milestone payments throughout the construction, much the same way as design build finance, but you'd be able to take some of those capital payments and spread them out over the 30 years. There would also be operating payments, and maintenance payments that would be negotiated as part of the agreement up front, so you would know how much would be paid to the project company over the 20 or 30 years. That's where you're going to get into discussions with the project company and be able to determine what the revenue sharing might be, what kinds of revenue risks they might want to retain. In some cases, for recreation facilities, for example, if they're operating types of restaurants or other types of facilities, there might be some profit sharing of those revenues with the city or with the private company. So you have to keep in mind a partnership, public-private partnership is indeed a partnership where the public does invest money and the private company does. And they're, of course, out to ensure that they're making some profits for their companies as well. So we need to keep that in mind. There are many different models and opportunities there to be discussed with them. In terms of a progressive design build, this is where we get into those projects, as I mentioned, that are more complicated, complex. The benefits of a progressive design build is that the owner engages the design build entity through an agreement, through a public tender process up at the beginning, and then you have an off-ramp. So if you can't come to an agreement on a fixed price at the end of the design phase for them to progress to the construction phase of the project, then you can tender for the construction phase of the project. But generally, what this allows, similar to a P3 model, is that integration of the designing and the building and the development of those documents at the same time. So there are oftentimes cost savings associated with that, as well as schedule savings, which I'm not hearing as a pressure here related to this project in terms of schedule, but certainly the cost savings opportunities. Excuse me. As I mentioned, it would be delivered as a fixed price. So you'd know how much money you'd be paying associated with this facility, depending on how you scoped it, whether that's including library, ice pads, or what it is that you're going to be scoping in the project. The city would be responsible for the operations and maintenance of this facility. Similarly, integrated project delivery, so these collaborative models, the operation and maintenance, as with the progressive design build, would be retained by the city. Again, IPD is about a complex project, requires a lot of collaboration. It's an open book model. It's for those types of projects where there are a lot of unforeseen risks and issues that might come about. And so this type of project, we haven't necessarily seen it on many pools, but we are seeing in terms of the market sounding, which I'll talk about in just a moment, generally that there are a lot of contractors that are moving towards the progressive model, and they are more interested in projects that are going out for procurement, these types of models, and they can be called modified design build, for example, for progressive design build. They are interested in them because they are right there at the design phase and can have a better line of sight on what their own book of business is going to be over a number of years. They're more invested and integrated in those projects. Similar, I should just finish out in terms of the integrated project delivery, in terms of the cost structure, there are target prices. As I mentioned, the books are open, so you have an idea of the reimbursement rates and the profit margins for the private partner. Oftentimes, as I mentioned, for complex projects, you'd want this. For IPD, we only know of one change order, for example, for all the projects that have been delivered across Canada. There's only ever been one change order to date on the projects that are delivered in this method. So an advantage of this project delivery method would be to minimize those change orders and potential cost increases related to the project. That's all I had in terms of slides to explain the different procurement models, but if you'll permit me for just a moment to speak about the market sounding, and what you will benefit from for a market sounding would be asking questions along the lines of, does this scope of the project make sense? Are you able to deliver this type of project? Are you interested in this type of project? What would be some limitations, some issues that you might have with regards to delivering it? Is it a question of capacity, your capacity for your company? Is it local market capacity? Do you see any concerns with regards to the size of the facility? Is it more? And then you can ask questions around revenue generating opportunities as well. Would you be more interested in this procurement if you were able to generate revenues from different restaurants or types of facilities as well? So you can get at those types of questions. And as Mr. Lewis mentioned, there are all conversations that are held with the contractors or architects with just a couple of people. We wouldn't have city folks generally in attendance so that they're open, candid, and give you as much information as possible to have a successful procurement once you've figured out exactly what you'd like in that box in terms of that future aquatic facility or aquatic plus facility. I think that I've covered what we were planning on covering, but I'm certainly here and available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Andrea. And just before we start taking questions from the council members, if I could just go back to Mr. Unrau's question and also your comment regarding milestone payments. So during the construction stage of the P3 project, the city would be responsible for making some milestone payments. Can you give us just an understanding of what those milestone payments may consist of, or the value of those? If we, and I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you what you think this new project would be worth, but if we were to just generalize and say it's a $50 million project, kind of get a project of that size, give us an understanding of what those milestone payments might be?
Certainly. So essentially what they would do in the case of arranging their financing is that the private partner would have a lender's direct agreement, and you would have access to that to be able to see what it is that the payment terms and expectations are based on the payment mechanism that you've identified in your contract. Generally, what you'd see are annual milestone payments or milestone payments based on the value of the asset that has been constructed. So assuming it's a $50 million project, if you're at 30% completion, you could expect that you would have negotiated a requirement to have a milestone payment at that point, the value of 30% of the construction, if it's a DBF. If you're in the world of a DBFOM, you're spreading those capital payments over the number of years. So it'll be a factor of what has been completed to date, as well as what structure they've put in place with their lenders in terms of repayment of the debt requirements.
Okay, so if I'm understanding that correctly, then if we were to do a $50 million project and we were to take that over 25 years, simple math tells me it's $2 million a year that we would be paying to the P3 partner. With that being said, there could be some milestone payments during construction that would lower that annual fee, but we would have to put that up front during the construction stages. Am I correct?
Correct. I would expect that you'd see a larger portion that needs to be paid by the end of the construction phase, and a smaller portion that would be over the phase of the operating and maintenance. I don't want to suppose probably, but 60% or more would be paid during the construction phase. 60 to 70% would be paid during the construction phase, and then the tail would be over the 20, 30 years.
Okay, so 60 to 70% during construction we'd have to pay, and then the remaining 40 to 30% we'd spread over the 20 or 25 years.
And that does not include any revenue generating opportunities that might be negotiated with the private partner, but it doesn't preclude the need to pay for the construction of the facility.
And it doesn't include ongoing operations and maintenance fees and administration fees that we would also potentially have to pay, am I correct?
Correct. So those would be fixed as part of the contract, and they would be subject to performance deductions. So you'd have that outlined in the payment mechanism. So if you look at your $42 million cost, that doesn't factor in the operations and maintenance over the number of years as well. So it would be higher.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea, and I'm going to look to the mayor, who may have some questions of the elected now.
Sure.
Mr. Lewis, and hopefully that, because it was a great question from Mr. Unruh, so that, okay. So I have the deputy mayor, and then I have Councillor Lafreniere, then Councillor Purcell, and Councillor Keel, and I'll be seeing if Councillor Plummer wishes to speak, because again, I can't see him.
Hello, thank you for spending time with us today. Through the mayor, I have a question. So the milestone payments, every P3 structure agreement is different, right? There's no one golden rule model. So we can make an arrangement with the P3 consortium that there might not be milestone payments. I see some P3s you sign an agreement to buy 1,000 hours worth of ice time at a set fee, and then you sell it back to your users in the city, and then there's a management fee that you pay. You know, I've seen figures of 75,000, 350,000, plus the ice time that you buy. So you really won't know the structure of the deal until you issue the expression of interest. Is that correct? And the company responding puts in their vision, their financials, their plan.
So Ms. Finley,
It's just a question of, I'll answer that question in two parts. One, yes, you can negotiate what it is that you would like with the P3 partner. What you would like to do is to be in a position to see what kinds of flexibilities there are available in the market. So the two ways that you can do that are through a market sounding, through informal conversations, or you can do it in a more formal way through the expression of interest, where you're asking respondents to answer. They can be very similar questions to the market sounding, but you're asking them to respond in writing, which does take more effort and more time on their part. You can get to some of those answers through both of those types of vehicles, and you're able to see what they may be able to put on the table and what they'd be open to.
Right, okay, thank you.
Lafreniere?
Thank you. A little confused. I'm not afraid to admit it. Now, the P3, I was under the impression that we didn't pay 100% to build this new facility. And what I'm hearing is that we are going to pay milestone payments based on what type of debenture or loan that company is going to take on. Would it be 100% of the payments? I was thinking it was more a percentage, because I thought they were building it. I know that we would have to provide some funding or finance support, signing on the loan, that type of thing. But I was under the assumption that a P3, they were taking on risk with that loan as well, and it was more of a partnered loan, and then we would own the building. Am I missing something here, or if you could just clarify that for me a little bit more, I'd appreciate it.
Ms.
Then I
Finley?
have one other question through the chair as well after that.
Okay, Ms. Finley?
No problem. In terms of risk transfer, there's a lot of, in the past, the advantages associated with a P3 is that you're going to get a fixed price contract. So you know exactly what it is that you're going to get. You know that you're going to have your operator, in the case of a DBFOM, over the number of years. They have constructed the facility and such, they'll be able to operate it. So you're going to have some cost savings associated with that. You're also going to transfer certain risks. For example, geotechnical risks, like for example, when they're digging, being able to hit different lines, that sort of thing, or any issues that they may encounter. You're also going to transfer any risks associated with, as you mentioned, it could be associated with revenue generation if they're willing to take on the revenue generation risks. So for example, a bridge, a tolling risk, that sort of thing. So there are different risks that are transferred. There are lots of advantages of undertaking a P3, but choosing a procurement model will be based on what objectives you're trying to get to for your facility. I can say that through these conversations that I've heard this evening, it seems like a big point is the question of being able to afford the facility and where the revenues are going to be coming from. So I think a lot of questions should probably be exploring those types of opportunities, where the private partner could invest some funds, and then where they're going to generate revenues and profits from. If you think about a restaurant, for example, in a recreational facility, or even I'm based in Ottawa, like Lansdowne Park, for example, they're running these facilities, they're generating revenues associated with them. So that's what's in it for them to invest in part of the facility, because they know that they'll be able to generate these revenues. In the case of a recreational complex in a municipality, you have to think who those stakeholders are. It's not like the city of Ottawa and people coming in for big CFL games. It's your taxpayers and your folks in your city, right? So if you want a private partner to come in and generate revenues, no problem. You just have to remember who the tax base and revenues are going to be coming from, whether it's paying for aquatic facilities or, as my 17-year-old loves, her $8 Starbucks coffees. I don't know why so much, but yes. So there are definitely other opportunities for revenue generation, and it's a question of what the private partner is willing to invest in this facility, what they're going to get out of it as well.
So just thank you for that. I just want to I want a comment on something that was said. And that was, I believe, Mr. Lewis said, we have to decide, are we at a breaking point where, it's going to be more beneficial to build a big facility because of the costs that we're looking at over the next 5 to 10 years to improve our other facilities? I want to say that I'm not concerned about those rates because I would love to see some type of assessment to see what are we subsidizing now, because I do believe we're not making money on our recreation facilities. So when we're renting out our ice for $186.20 an hour, or we're charging our swimming lesson rates, I'm sure we're subsidizing it already. I don't believe that we have a surplus in our recreation budget due to all the money we're taking in. That's not happening. So as far as I'm concerned, when you look at the money that we have to invest in the next few years in our facilities, and you take that into account, if we don't have to spend that money, and you take what we're already subsidizing, so how much are we losing a year? If you take that and put it towards those fees, I really don't think that's going to be the issue, because if we have to continue to subsidize our own residents, so be it. But I don't think the rates would be the same as in the city anyway, because anybody you talk to that lives in the city, everything is more expensive in the city. Costs more to run, et cetera, et cetera. Daycare in the city is like $80 a day. It's 40 or 45 here. So, when you look at that, I'm not worried about the rates, because I really think if we can save money at the city at an operating level, put that money into reserves for the next 20 years, when we do own the building, we will have a healthy reserve and we can move forward from there. So those are my opinions on the P3 if we were to get a successful partnership. So thank you very much, and thank you.
Councillor Purcell?
Thank you, Chair. Maybe just to piggyback off of Councillor Fernia's comment, it cost $1.8 million for 8,000 users for the pool last year. So I'm trying to understand in regards to the market survey and what that would, or the market sounding, what that would look like. I'm familiar with the RFI, RFQ, RFP processes, but not the market sounding process. I was part of the integrated project delivery team at CNL that built the Science and Collaboration Center, and that was on budget and on time. I think it was within a month. So I just don't understand why we would go to a market sounding when we can just go straight to an RFI. So an RFI, the request for information would be, building a pool of potential agencies, identifying the appropriate project model to get information about a specific, build or design build. It's focused on broad and topical information. It also occurs there in the early stages of consideration of a project or initiative. And it's also less detailed, but more of an overview of the initiative. So I just don't know how we would go out and identify those individuals that we'd want to go out and provide that market sounding, target those individuals. Meanwhile, an RFI would go out to every individual just to respond and say what services that you have to offer to provide that. What I like about a P3 is that you know your costs. I'll tell you one thing, we had to put a roof on Riverside Park, Rotary Park. You guys remember that one? $50,000 was budgeted for a shingled roof. And I think it went for $83,000 was the contract award. That's not controlling costs. And I could tell you one thing, when you start talking about building and big construction projects, what we want to do is we want to be able to mitigate those risks, and those risks end up with the contractor and the constructor. And that's what the advantage in terms of going to a P3 model would be. So typically, developers aren't paid out until the project is substantially completed. And so we know the costs ahead of time. We can forecast what the operating you know, efforts were going to be going down the road. We know exactly when the building could be turned over, or the facility being turned over. We can establish, you know, like I think we should be doing as a council, and it's unfortunate that previous councils haven't looked at that, is anytime that you commission a building, you should be looking at what's going to cost you to decommission it or replace it. And you put money away. I've heard, you know, councillors around this table say, well, we don't want future taxpayers or taxpayers to pay for things of future taxpayers. It's the right way to do business. That's absurd. So I think we need to start looking at how we're doing our business. We have to look at potentially just going right to the RFI, because I think it's a savings of about $40,000 or $50,000. And I think you're going to get the same information. I think, you know, allow those proponents to come back with the information, to let them know what is the best model for us to move forward that limits our risk and allows us to proceed with this in a timely manner. So I think that's the direction that I'd be looking at, is go straight to an RFI or expression of interest. Thank you.
Mr. Keel?
Two questions, so I'll pick up first on what Councillor Purcell was just asking. So the market sounding, I had never heard of either, and to be honest, I read the materials and I still didn't understand what a market sounding is. My concern, I guess, is we spend $40,000 on a market sounding and then spend $50,000 on a request for interest and then find that there's no interest, and we now spent $90,000 that nobody's interested in. So I'm wondering if you could pick up on Councillor Purcell's, I guess he didn't really question the market sounding, but could you try selling me on the market sounding and why we would do that instead of just going to the request for interest?
Happy to answer the question. I just want to give an opportunity to Mr. Lewis in case he wanted to jump in there before I do answer the question.
Through the chair, Andrea, I just want to make sure you remember, we have already done a request for a pre-qualification on the Aquatic Center. So we do have that shortlisted group of interested parties on that item. I just want to make sure that you remembered that before you continued your answer. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. For sure. Thank you very much for the question. I'm not sure in terms of background or knowing much about me, but I spent actually 15 years in the federal public service. So certainly when it comes to ensuring that we get value for money, transparency, open, transparent procurement process, extremely near and dear to my heart. I've been in the consulting business now for about 7 years, but still work a lot with my federal and municipal colleagues. So I do want to say that in terms of what it is that you need and what you want to get out of the market in terms of information, you can go to multiple options. So I can extol the virtues of a market sounding by saying that it is very light in terms of the effort that is required on the part of the respondents. And to Mr. Lewis's point, you do have a list of pre-qualified firms. Colliers also works with a lot of different construction companies and architects as well that we could reach out to. And what we would do in a market sounding is essentially like the request for information or expression of interest, is reach out to these companies and say, we have this project that the city is interested in going forward with. We understand that you had previously bid on it and you're pre-qualified. Would you be willing to have a conversation with us about potential change in scope or costs or schedule and that sort of thing associated with the project, or revenue generating opportunities? So that would be in part how we would develop the list. We'd also develop it in discussion with the city if there were other parties that you wanted us to reach out to. In terms of availability for the RFI and EOI on a public forum, you're correct that it would be posted publicly to be able to reach anybody who is seeing those particular requests for information or expression of interest as well. So they're just different venues. And when you're looking at an RFI and an EOI, it's more effort required on the part of the construction architecture companies to be able to provide a written response. You know your market best. We are there certainly supporting on other projects as well, and we'll bring our best advice as to whether or not it makes sense to go either way. But in terms of the level of market interests, they're just two different venues in terms of the level of effort that's required on the part of the contractors. And if you're in a position where you feel that they have the time or the interest or the energy to invest in it and they're comfortable with that, then certainly then you can go down the RFI or EOI route as well. It's another option.
My second question, which you kind of led yourself into, is at the moment in terms of these P3 options, and I know I've been sent a couple by councillors around this table, but I think I've been sent every news article by a few people on Facebook that mention the word P3 in it. So I get that they're out there. I get that it seems to be sort of the flavor of the moment, and I get that the federal government has been looking at them perhaps more excitedly in their development bank model. I'm not holding you to any prediction, but if we were to go down that route, would we see some federal or provincial funding going down that route to help us out in terms of financing this project?
I think that that's a good question to ask in the context of source of funds and funding sources. So you have the option of the revenue opportunities to get some of that information through the market sounding or through RFI, EOI processes as mentioned. The other one is exploring grants from Infrastructure Canada, that sort of thing. So I think that you could look at what types of programs are out there. There are some that will fund projects because they meet certain environmental standards. But I'm not in a position to say which programs the city would necessarily be eligible for at this time, but it is something that you can certainly investigate.
Councillor Plummer, you haven't had an opportunity to speak to this last section. Did you wish to speak?
Yes, I certainly. I'm from looking at my notes here and listening to everything. It sounds like the market sounding is a bit of an RFI light. So a lot of the information seems by our presenter here by Andrea, kind of seems to say that you're going to find out similar information between the market sounding and the expression of interest. Just the expression of interest seems to be more of a more labor intensive for the contractor or design company, that they really have to submit some time into it and for the proposal. I understand that Mr. Lewis has mentioned, maybe there's some idea, maybe we look at some studies on, like feasibility studies on our existing, better understanding of our existing facilities to help us understand what, going forward for a big mega facility is the right direction. So that's interesting, just to weigh the cost, because as I said, I think someone made the analogy of how much you spend on an old car before you decide to replace it. That's keen thinking. And so right now, I'm not really sold on a market sounding is going to spend 40, then to turn around and spend 50. Seems to get the similar information, maybe we can do another way and not have to do the market sounding and just do maybe there's a feasibility study that doesn't cost 40, just to understand where we're putting this facility, if the Trans-Canada Corporate Park is the right facility for it. So at this point, I'm just not sold on doing a market sounding and then turn around and do expression of interest, gathering the same information twice. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Councillor Plummer, and if I can from the chair, and then we'll see where we move on from there. Everyone's had an opportunity to speak. I appreciate Ms. Finley in terms of all the information that you've provided us, as well as to staff in terms of the different comments, because I'm looking through my comments about what does it cost in terms of regarding staff? Are we laying off staff? The cost to rent the new facility. So I did look at the Bell Sensplex and see that the municipality buys the time at a very increased rate. You sort of touch upon it in terms of the report. My concern is with Pembroke Minor Hockey as well as the Pembroke Lumber Kings, and if they can go somewhere cheaper, would they not be pushed out to Whitewater or some other area? The location, you've already touched upon that it's certainly not within walking distance or anything like that. One thing that isn't touched upon on anything that I found that I was thinking about is that the PMC and PEMICE 2, we did, when looking at the pool, look at the cost of tearing it down. Presumably there would be a cost of tearing down the PMC and PEMICE 2. Certainly you wouldn't want anyone to buy it and be in competition with whatever facility that we do. Similar to Councillor Plummer, I'm interested in the feasibility study just to see, are we at that point? And the last 2 points, which was raised very early on in terms of this evening or this afternoon, was in terms of other municipalities and so forth, which begs the question in terms of renegotiating our rec agreement as well as charging rent for the library so that other municipalities or non-users pay their fair share. In any event. So, Deputy Mayor?
So, when I made the motion November 7th, I mentioned the PMC replacement and a second ice surface and the aquatic complex. I didn't say we were going to close down PEMICE 2. That wasn't my intent. As Councillor Fenny was commenting, we don't know what the arrangement would be. We're hearing Sensplex quotes and that, but I do know that the Sensplex has minor hockey rates also. That's all negotiated. This is all part of negotiated. Anyone can throw around figures. We won't know till you go straight to expression of interest and find out what's available. And if it's not worth our while, I'll be the first one to say this is not worth it. But you have to open it up to the public, widespread, across the country, and find out what's available. And everything can be negotiated. But I think it's worth a shot, and it's definitely worth looking into. But I'd support spending 50,000 on the expression of interest, but not 40, because we're going to get more information, go straight to the expression of interest. And the other thing I just want to finish, if this was to happen, you could have national hockey championships, tournaments, with an up-to-date facility, curling, Bondsfield, national, and also concerts. So there's a lot of possibility. It is definitely worth looking into, because the treasurer gave a report in September about the asset management update and the millions of dollars. So that we've already seen the structural 2020 study that was done. So I think we should put this out there, and study after study and feasibility study. Let's move it forward and see what we get back.
Ms. Lochte?
So just a couple points. I guess my concern with the P3 is that we haven't really ironed out what exactly we would look for in a facility. Like we said, maybe one ice pad, maybe two, maybe the library, maybe not. So I'm just concerned that we don't have enough information in terms of how we want to scope the size of the project. We've been laser focused on the pool for a number of years now, and we've just been trying to get that done so we can look at other projects. And now, of course, it's so expensive, and we can't get the partnerships. But we haven't really looked at it as a package to know how do we want to scope a potential P3? Does it make sense? Should we be repairing these other facilities, or should we be replacing it and considering a multiplex or not? And as well, the Recreation Master Plan will be providing some sort of visionary, kind of strategic guidance in terms of how to shape a project in the future. So I'm just a little concerned that we're maybe not in the best position because we haven't fully scoped what our requirements are. So I think from my perspective, I'm a little concerned about going too fast down the path and then changing tacks, because the Recreation Master Plan is going to come back and say, we don't need this many ice pads in the future, or suggest other different types of services that we might want to offer. I guess the other point I wanted to make was that I do have some concerns about P3s in general, just because the city is able to obtain lower rates of financing than typically private sector can receive, right? In terms of the interest rates that we pay, municipalities, are able to get quite competitive financing rates from Infrastructure Ontario. And we can certainly look at increasing user fees on our own, without having to go to an outside party to charge somebody $340 an hour. I mean, we can look at our own rates and increase them if we don't feel that what we're charging is appropriate. I guess the other side to this is that we're sort of at a breaking point, I think, in terms of our current agreement, because, as we look forward, whether or not we have to do significant repairs on existing buildings or replace existing buildings, it's all going to require an exceptional amount of money. And our partnership agreement with the Laurentian Valley caps capital at $59,100 a year. And that's going to be nowhere close to the amount of money that we need to spend on any of these facilities coming up. So I certainly think taking a look at, where do we go from here with Laurentian Valley is certainly a consideration. And a P3 does sort of sidestep that issue because now we're both dealing with a central party, not trying to negotiate between each other. So, I mean, it's definitely, I think, worthwhile to look at on the one hand, but I'm a little worried that, have we really scoped it out properly enough yet to say with certainty, how would we want this new facility? What components would we want to be in this new facility?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Andrea, if you're still on the line, I'll ask you to help clarify a couple things for me. Andrea, the City of Pembroke has done numerous requests for proposals in the past on various different projects, and at times we've seen what I would call bid takers or takers of the requests. Upwards of 18 or 20 different companies would take out those RFPs, and we'd get 2 or 3 respondents. And I expect has a lot to do with the amount of work to do a formal response in an RFP. So I've got a couple questions here, but the first one I'll pose to you is that because of the amount of work involved? So if we were to do a formal EOI or RFPQ or something of that nature to see if we could garner interest, there would be a significant formal response requirement by the proponents, and we may get more response if we do it as a market sounding. That's question number 1. Question number 2, to do an EOI or an RFP or RFPQ, I would assume that we would have to put a lot more legwork into putting that document together so that we could get formal responses. And that kind of goes along with Madam Treasurer's comments that we would really need to scope the project significantly to make sure that we were asking for formal responses that could answer to those questions. And the last comment I'm going to ask you, or I'll make a comment to ask you to comment back. We are going to have a recreation master plan in August of 2024. If we start down the path right now of an EOI, asking for a formal response and have proponents working on or have submitted those formal responses, and the rec plan changes our direction, do we anticipate we're going to get these same proponents to answer back to us again, or are they just going to throw in the towel and say, we're not exactly sure what we want, so we're not coming back to you? And I'll just put those out and see if you have any comments back to us here on those. Thanks, Andrea.
No problem. Thank you. Few questions. All right. In terms of the, as the treasurer was commenting on the scope of project, the more you can define exactly what the scope of the project is and what it is that you're going out for, whether it's before a market sounding or an expression of interest, the better answers you're going to get back from the market, right? So if you go out and you ask questions, for example, of would this make more sense if it also had a library? Would it make more sense, more attractive to you if it also had these components? You can ask those questions for sure, but the more you can define that scope and have undertaken that feasibility study and those options, the more you're going to get out of both of those processes. So to address that as much as you can. in terms of getting more response from a market sounding the level of investment and interest, we have heard some feedback from folks during market sounding process, actually just recently in Ontario, where they had submitted bids for a particular project, and then the project was canceled for various reasons. Their level of interest in responding was certainly diminished for another procurement that would potentially go out, because responding to a request for qualifications where you're shortlisting the different companies to be able to invite it to request for proposals is definitely more labor intensive. And similarly, an expression of interest is not as intensive as a request for qualifications, because they don't have to prove their technical capacity, but they have to write written responses, and they're held to those written responses. The advantage of a market sounding is that it is anonymized. It is an hour or two of their time to review background documents, an hour conversation. So they certainly are investing a lot less in time and effort into that, but are providing that opportunity to give that feedback. And we tend to, of, let's say, 10, 12 folks that we reach out to, because we generally have a higher number, we get about 10 or 11 of them responding. So it's very rare not to have somebody say, yes, I will take the time to respond to this and give you some insights to make this as successful as possible. To your point about the level of effort invested and the response rate associated with it. I think that I've covered your questions, but if there's something else you'd like me to clarify, please let me know.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. It was just one last thing. Seeing that the City of Pembroke is doing a recreation master plan that's due out in August of '24, if we go through whatever process or the various processes to garner interest in a P3 project and then change our direction after the recreation master plan, do we risk losing those proponents after the fact?
Thank you. Apologies. I don't know that you necessarily risk losing the proponents, but I'll say the inverse. If you signal, to the market that you're moving forward with a particular type of project, you're essentially getting them to start thinking that way and potentially mobilizing their resources associated with it. So if you were to change, say, the procurement model, timeline, schedule associated with the project, that amount of time and effort and resources that they've invested potentially going to bid on your project would then not be something, it would be wasted, essentially, because you have changed what it is that you're going to be going forward, and it could potentially sour that a little bit.
Thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, there's a number of people with questions. First, I believe Mr. Unruh is waving at me. So, Mr. Unruh.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so just along that line, I'm kind of thinking the same lines with Mr. Lewis and Andrew with respect to the rec master plan. I'm very concerned, and I think the treasurer mentioned also, is that, we're going to go through the process in regards to P3. We would get to the stage where it would be close to being awarded, and then we'd have the completion of the rec master plan. And, the things that we did 5 years ago are much different than we do now, and the things that we're going to do in 10, 15 years from now will be different. So I think it's really critical that we see that information in regards to the rec master plan before we proceed on. I'm not saying that we're not going to proceed on the route of the P3, but at least wait for that information so that we can properly scope it. And then also utilize the feasibility study. Use the time between now and the completion of the rec master plan to do a feasibility study on those couple other facilities and kind of, ask that hard question in regards to, is it better to maintain what's existing or, to renew it? So, so not to kind of push council in one direction or not, but really looking at that staff-wise, but then kind of really refocusing back on the original part of the presentation. If we can get a decision on what we want to do with the existing facility. Do we want to spend the 1.1 million or 1.4 million so that we can keep a facility open for the residents of the city of Pembroke?
Thank you. I have Councillor Keel,
Okay, I'm going to shoot a question in two directions, and one is going to be towards the staff, and the other one's going to be towards the deputy mayor. So, certainly, if we're going to go down a road, I would like to go down the road in the right direction. And the one thing that does concern me, and I have expressed this to the deputy mayor, is, you know, what is going to be in this particular multi-use complex. I mean, I'll throw it out there. I've had residents come to me, and I'm personally somewhat partial to us having an indoor field dome. Maybe that's something to look at, but I think the treasurer's correct that we keep saying, well, maybe this and maybe that. And in terms of your timeline, because we're being crunched by the pool situation, what would staff's reasonable timeline look like, knowing that I think some around this table want to get moving at some point? I mean, the pool now has been a topic in the community for literally a decade, and we're no further ahead today than we were 10 years ago. So what would staff's reasonable, articulated timeline look like? And to the deputy mayor, the question is the inverse, which is, what's the rush? And I would really like the answer to both of those questions.
Through the chair, if I could ask for clarification, reasonable timeline for what? Because if I have to answer based on what I'm hearing, we would like an answer tonight. And to be blunt, we would like an answer tonight on what we're going to do with the existing pool. As far as a $42 million aquatic facility or a P3 or whatever, we're thinking that's 4 years down the road before we're going to see that type of facility constructed and commissioned. We're 3 to 5 for sure, and likely more 4 to 5 years. So I don't believe anybody up here at staff is in a rush to start tomorrow on a P3 project. If we're going to head in that direction and we're going to have a closed pool for that 4 or 5 year period, then we need some answers on what direction we're going to take. Market sounding, EOI, RFI, something of that nature needs to happen real quick because we're going to have a closed pool. So I'm not sure if I was answering your question correctly, if that's what you were looking for.
So if we're going to go down the P3 route, I haven't yet figured out what to do with the pool, but I'm not going to spend too much money on something that I think I might close. If we're going to go down the P3 route and we want to properly investigate going down that road, I'm hearing that we want to at least wait till next summer with the recreation master plan. So I'm more looking at, if that's the direction we're going in, what would your timeline be for us to figure out what we want in it? And obviously the recreation master plan is one of the answers, but like when would you feel comfortable in a position to even get on the P3 question on ramp?
Through the chair, I would suggest we're probably looking at, if we have the recreation master plan in August, give us some time, 4 to 6 weeks to kind of meld through that recreation master plan. In the meantime, if we can be having the serious conversations on what we would think we would want into a P3 or mega or multiplex, we can be doing that in the meantime. It would get confirmed with the recreation master plan, whether or not we were headed in the right direction. We may need a couple months after that to put something together and scope what we think a multiplex would be. So it's expression of interest, RFI, one of the various different processes to move forward. I would suggest it's likely October, November of next year by the time we could, waiting on the recreation master plan.
And what do we need to do with the pool between now and next October? Like, need to do between now and then?
need to do, I would suggest we need to remove the existing building envelope and replace the building envelope. That would be my opinion.
So Councillor Keel, the question for me, but I have a question for Mr. DeRoche first. Is there a preliminary rec master plan report coming to us before August?
Yeah, so through the chair, that is scheduled for January.
For January?
For the phase one, yeah.
So will phase one recommend facilities?
No, so phase one is basically just going to go through the survey. So all the data that they collected, they're going to present their findings on the surveys only.
But any comments from the public, like towards facilities?
Yeah, absolutely, because that's going to be the information that they're going to pull from the survey. So all the information that they're pulling for the survey, they'll be able to provide that to council.
So there could be a comment on a multi-sportsplex facility?
Yeah, there could be. I haven't been given any information at this point in time, but there certainly could be.
Right. So, in answer to your question, Councillor Keel, I made the motion for expression of interest for a P3 facility because our treasurer came to us with a report with millions of dollars on all these facilities. We've been talking about the pool last council term. We're talking about it now. We still don't have a pool. We are going to hopefully support, put money in to fix it, 1.1 million tonight. But just to move things forward. Now we're talking, wait till October, November next year. I read an article in the Observer Online from 3 years ago where we made a motion to start looking into the pool, and I know Mayor LeMay had a meeting when I was overseas about the pool. So I want to move things forward and get the expression of interest out there. We can scope it out as a staff and council, what we want in it. Preliminary reports coming in January, but let's move things along. We keep stalling, so let's get it on the road.
Here's the answer such that it is Councillor Keel, Councillor Defendian, and Councillor Purcell, and then I'm going to try and see what Councillor Plummer, if he wishes to weigh in.
So the question before us, we know that we want to continue to pursue either a P3 or something. What we need to say is, how much are we willing to spend to keep this pool open and safe until that time? Now, if we go the $2 million route and do the whole bells and whistles to get this up and running for 25 to 40, but we only keep it open for 4 years, it's costing us $500,000 a year, okay? If we keep it open for 5 years and then build a new facility, this pool is costing us $400,000 a year. That's a lot of money for a pool we're going to close. If we only do what we have to do, it's $1.1 million. So that's just to keep it open. Then it would be $250,000 a year if we kept it open for 4 years. So that's what we need to ask ourselves now is, what do we want to do? Do we want to spend $500,000 a year until we decide what we're doing, which could be 2 years from now only? So if it's only 2 years from now, we've spent $1 million per year on a pool we're going to tear down. So that's what we need to ask ourselves now. Are we keeping this pool open? Because if we are, and we pursue a new pool, it's a costly adventure. Like, it's $1 million or $2 million to keep a facility open for maybe 2 years, maybe 3, or maybe we'll just forget about a new pool, keep this pool open for as long as we can with those annual improvements, but we're going to be sitting here, well, I won't be, in 40 years, making the same decision. So it's, do we spend the money now on a pool that we're going to close, or do we just invest the money in this pool and be happy with what we have? That's what we need to know. Or do we have to just say we're closing the pool till further notice, till we decide what we're doing? And if we decide we're not building a new pool, then let's fix the pool. The problem being, we got to remember this, we lose staff, we lose users in the meantime. Maybe the interest goes away, I don't know. So you've got those risks too by closing a pool. But if we have to close a pool, Or do we go to Laurentian Valley and say, okay, you know what? If you want to keep the pool open until we make a decision, we have to reopen our agreement. Will you help us pay these fees to fix up the pool today? So we have some options there, but we need to decide what for staff.
Councillor Purcell?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to get my head around in terms of what we're going to get out of the recreational master plan in terms of insights. I think that's what I'm trying, because I've seen master plans from various different municipalities. They're not really that intuitive in regards to providing direction. So I want to make sure that we don't have this high expectation in terms of it's going to identify a direction that we're going to go run in. And I don't see that with, other recreational master plans from other municipalities. I do recognize that it would be beneficial to have those discussions if we're doing more of a regional complex, because then you need to engage, Petawawa, Pembroke, Laurentian Valley, Whitewater, because they're all building these master plans to sit down and kind of say, hey, we can't be everything to everybody, and what are you good at, and what are we good at, so that way we don't duplicate the services because we can't afford duplication of the services. We're forgetting about the 20-year investment. We got $1 million to put just into our 2 arenas over the next 20 years based on, that's $1 million for 20 years. That's a 5% levy increase, just to maintain the arenas based on the presentation that was provided in September. So, I mean, we have some hard decisions to make, but, do we value the pool? Of course we value the pool. Do we want to continue with the pool? I don't know. Because there's going to have to make some hard decisions. And I think a $2 million or even $1.1 million investment right now, and not really kind of understanding where we're going to be, doesn't sound like a sound investment. That being said, I know other organizations that got themselves into trouble when they didn't run a facility. They stopped investing in a facility and things changed. And then what happened is they couldn't recoup the facility. It was too big of a cost. So we got to be careful of that too. But I do think now's the time to go out for a P3. I do think now's the time to go out for a RFI and get that information to see who's interested in that. And I think, I think we need to close the pool. I honestly think that the pool needs to be closed. I think there's too big of an investment. There's a lot of dollars there. We already said if you go back to the reports, the asset management says it's already reached its end of life. We have concerns by a consultant that says that, if it's a windstorm or a snowstorm, you got to have somebody monitoring the facility. To me, that screams liability. So either close the pool, shut it down, take the operating costs, put them away, invest them into doing it right, going about the P3 or whatever direction in terms of whatever the preferred construction choice in terms of that model that makes sense for us, and moving forward with a new facility, because if we put $1 million into those facilities in 20 years, we still have a 90-year-old PMC. It's not going to last forever, I hate to tell you. Right? It's not going to last forever. So, I mean, we got to bite the bullet. And like I said, unfortunately, when we look at these types of arrangements going forward, we got to think about the costs in terms of decommissioning and the cost of replacing it. So we need to get that that's good business sense. So let's start thinking that way. So when we start building a brand new arena or a pool, we got to start thinking of what's the shelf life of this? How much is it going to cost us to replace it? Probably back then, when we go to replace it, it's $120 million. But we got to start thinking about that, because we can't do this to our ratepayers. Just alone in terms of just the maintenance on terms of the two arenas. 5% rate increase. Do you hear that, City of residents, Pembroke residents? 5% rate increase for the next 20 years. That's what it works out to. We have to make some tough decisions. Everything's gone up. The costs are just ridiculous. We don't have partners. We don't have a commitment from a provincial government or federal government in terms of stepping up. We've tried, we looked at it, but I think now there's some tough decisions that need to be made, and I think my recommendation would be to close the pool.
Thank you. Councillor Plummer, I cannot see you, as I've said before, so did you wish to comment at this time, because you're the only individual that hasn't commented on this round?
Thank you, Mayor. I think what staff's looking for tonight, or what I've been hearing, is a decision to going forward with the pool. I think they've also said that they will will work on an expression of interest. It will eventually, we need to get some more information and have a properly flushed out idea before we just throw one out there. I think that can be done hopefully in a timely manner and not 8 months down the road. But I think with the decision on the pool today, now I did hear the treasurer mention that this was to be debated, I guess, at budget. Now going around the council table, hearing, certain councillors saying, they're in favor of one versus the other, one option or the other. I'd like to put a motion on the floor to get this moving, and then we can then debate it then in budget, is for the immediate repair of the pool in the amount of $1.1 million to keep it open.
Okay, it's seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Plummer, did you want to say anything more? And then I'm going to speak for the...
I think from this standpoint, the pool has been a staple in the community for many years. We understand it's old. I don't negate any comments made by any other councillor, understanding that we have to be very mindful of costs and not throwing good money at something poor that may not last. But with the presentation tonight, they're saying if we do just the immediate repairs, that can get us, roughly 25 years. Well, understanding that even putting an expression of interest out could take upwards of 5 years before we get completed. And maybe a pool, maybe if we phase the construction of this facility, maybe a pool isn't going to be done in year 5. Maybe under the expression of interest, it says ice pads are the preference to be built first, and then a pool is phased in at years 7 or 8. I don't know the answer to that. So maybe this is an option to keep the pool open, and therefore we can then take our time, get the expression of interest out, decide on what facilities we actually need, and move forward, which I think the whole city, we need to move forward and understand what things cost and keep them under control. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Plummer, and thank you for putting a motion forward so that we can move this forward. Certainly, I would support the motion, understanding then there would be presumably council would direct in terms of an expression of interest, knowing that we would still have to agree as to what that looks like, because I'm just looking at your news article on the weekend saying that there would be a PMC replacement, an aquatic complex, second ice pad, and possible library. So I'm surprised tonight that you're saying that no to the PMC closure. But anyways, does anyone wish to? So Councillor Frenier, Councillor Keel.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Yes, just a comment. That would be, so if we kept it open for 5 years, that would be an expense of just over $200,000 per year. I know that we do have some money in reserve for the pool, but I mean, this is not money we're going to debenture, so we would need this money right away to do the repairs. 700, that leaves 300 or maybe $400,000. I would imagine we could find that, but I would hope that we would keep it open for 5 years if we're spending $1 million. That's all I can say. So that gives us a little more time to do the construction. I like the phased idea that Councillor Plummer's talking about, though, because then we could probably negotiate that with our contractor, because we would have a pool that is operating, wouldn't be a rush, so maybe we could phase it in according. Maybe by then we could attract some funding partners, I don't know, and really hit home to them that this is the last resort. If you want to come to the table, please do now, because we don't know if a P3 is going to work, and I don't know that we're going to replace that pool. So I will support this. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Anyone else wish to speak to the actual motion? So Councillor Purcell.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure that people understand that the city currently budgets $1.8 million for the operation of the pool currently. So that's just, yeah, so now you add those additional dollars onto that for 8,000 visits per year.
Councillor Keel, and then Deputy Mayor, and then I'm calling the vote.
I'm really struggling to see how I would spend $1 million on a facility that most of the discussion tonight was moving in a different direction. And I don't think I can. So right now the pool is open. If we did an expedited expression of interest, which I'm hoping could get done in the next couple months, responses to that maybe a couple months later, now we're getting into the spring. Like I'm kind of wanting to not spend the money and delay this $1 million thing until after because the expression of interest might come back. Let's be honest. Nobody might be interested in Pembroke. I mean, the people that operate P3s might look at our population, look at how much market rent that they can get, because I think it was Councillor Lafreniere that said, you know, we're likely not able to charge Ottawa rates here in Pembroke. So it's possible that every P3 partner looks at us and goes, this won't work for our calculations. But I don't want to spend $1 million to find out that we do have some interest, and then in the spring we say, let's move forward, you know, with this P3 model, because at that point we've committed to spending $1 million for something that we now know we're closing. Unless somebody else can tell me what we're doing with that building after the $1 million, and maybe that's, I'll be honest with you, if somebody can tell me that, you know, we can use that building for something else after we spend $1 million, then that would play into my calculation. But at this point, I feel like it would be $1 million, maybe not down the drain, maybe completely down the drain, maybe partially down the drain, and I'm not prepared to spend $1 million based on, I'm not comfortable spending $1 million on that, but I would like to, I want to reserve my judgment until we hear back from the P3 expression of interest and we have an idea of where we're going.
John Raw?
Yeah, I just wanted to address the comment in regards to if we did go ahead and spend the $1 million on the facility and then we move ahead with a P3, you know, as it has been stated by staff, you know, that will take 3 to 4 years, and then we would be out of the pool business at the Kinsman, and we'd open up in the new location. We still have and you know, staff might look at me incorrectly, but and this is totally off the cuff, but we do have a good Butler building. So I don't know why we couldn't repurpose that for something else. We would have to gut it with everything else, but the Butler building is a shell, so I'm thinking that we could repurpose it.
Staff members wish to comment on Butler buildings and repurposing?
Through the chair, to the chair, yeah. You can repurpose a Butler building. I've seen them taken down and I've seen them packaged up and moved to other locations and put back up again. It's always possible with a Butler building. If the Kinsman pool building is no longer going to be a pool building because we've moved to another location, theoretically you fill the basin in, you make a new floor, and now it becomes a hall of sorts. You know, it's a big assembly area. I'm sure there may be ideas. I haven't really put my thoughts to what you could repurpose it for, but a structurally sound building can always be repurposed.
Thank you, and we've been at this 2.5 hours. I'm calling the question. Those in favor of the motion that's on the floor, can I show it? I'm calling the question. We've been at this for 2.5 hours. There's a motion on the floor. I'm calling the question. Those in favor of this motion? None. Councillor Plummer, I can't tell if you're in favor or against.
I'm in favor.
Okay, so 2 in favor, 3 in favor. Then at the motion 3, yeah. So that motion fails. Any other motions? Purcell, sorry.
I motion that we close the pool, take that current operating budget in terms of $2 million per year until such time, and put it towards reserves until such time that we have a plan forward with a new pool or a new P3 pool double ice pad service.
Your seconder for that motion. You're seconding it, Councillor Frenier? Okay, discussion on this motion. Councillor Frenier.
I have a question before I vote on this motion, even though I second it for discussion, but if I could ask staff, what if we didn't put the 1 million into it? We just put a new pump into it. Would we get away with the winter season? Could we close it in the spring when the rivers and lakes are available, or to just, what would be your recommendation if this passes to close the pool tonight? How long can we keep that operating?
Does staff have some estimate?
I would suggest we ask the structural engineer if Tashi is still on the line.
I'm still here. Here, let me start my video. Yeah, in terms of, I mean, to answer that question, in terms of how long do we have, well, I think we're past due what we have. So I think our previous suggestion was, could be 30 seconds, could be 3 years. I don't know. The building in its condition, that's why we suggested if you're going to keep it open, it's not without risk. You could have someone monitor it, basically. That's kind of the end game. So could you get through the winter? Well, I'm sure you could, but there's no guarantee. I can't guarantee anything. That's the problem. So it's not like if I tell you, yeah, if you just do nothing, I'll give you 6 more months. I think that's why we had suggested doing some sort of perhaps closing the building in storm events, or having someone at least monitor it just to make sure we don't, or at least inspect it more frequently so that some of those roof panels don't want to start coming down in the pool. So
Thank you.
Councillor Friend, you got any comment, or you just had that question on it? Questions? Okay, anyone else wish to speak to this particular motion? I'm seeing no one here. Councillor Plummer, I don't know if you want to speak to it or not. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but again, I can't see you, so.
No comment.
Okay, I'll call the question. Those in favor of this motion?
A.
Okay, two in favor and against? That motion fails. Next motion.
We had a motion for November 7th for the expression of interest to go forward, so it still stands. Correct?
If I can ask staff, the motion that was made on November 7th, does it have enough specificity for you staff to be able to do something with it? Because we obviously came here for a reason, I suspect.
I would suggest no. I would suggest that we just clarify exactly, now that we've got some more information on expression of interest, market sounding, RFI has been discussed, and
So
I guess I'd ask this way. Formal document and completed formal document coming back from proponents, or a market sounding where it's a confidential interview and a phone call.
formal document, formal expression of interest.
So if there's a motion on that one and there's no motion in respect to the current pool, presumably we continue to go along with the current pool the way it is, I'm presuming, because no one's moving to close it or put money into it or do anything else with it. Is that fair of staff? Ms.
So
Locke?
I'll answer to the previous question. Now that I understand we're looking for a formal, I would say the previous motion on expression of interest stands, and we could move forward with that. And I believe the treasurer wants to speak on the other.
I guess my question back to council is, as the holder of the insurance file and looking at the liability of the city, if we're having a full-time person there, monitoring the roof, what kind of message does that send in terms of the safety of the facility? How comfortable would you be as a user, and how comfortable would staff be to work there, right? And what kind of risk do we want to take?
based on the asset management plan, we're already understaffed by 0.5 full-time. We're already understaffed by 0.5 full-time equivalent and one pool operator.
Mr. Unruh? Okay, thank you. Mr. Unruh?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment in regards to the existing motion. I think it lacks clarity. I would like to see it to say that council directs staff to engage Collier to complete the RFI documents at a cost of, I think it was $40,000,
50?
$50,000.
So you good with that?
Yeah, I'll
Deputy
make
Mayor?
the motion.
Okay, and it's seconded by Councillor Keel. Any discussion on that particular motion? Councillor Plummer?
No discussion.
Thank you. Call the question. Those in favor? Councillor
Yay.
Plummer? Okay, so that's unanimous. So that motion passes, carried. Councillor Purcell?
Okay, this is about dollars and cents and about liability. So we need to figure out what we're gonna do with the pool. We hear the treasurer talking about she's the insurance holder. We have a consultant saying you need to have somebody monitoring the facility in terms of safety of the facility. Come on, guys. We're paying $1.8 million in terms of operating that pool right now, per year. That's not including the upgrades. That's not including dehumidification. That's a lot of dollars for 800 users, 8,000 users, I apologize, 8,000 users. Yes, would I like to see the pool? I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it operational. Right now, it doesn't make sense. Let's move forward to look at a new facility incorporated with the double ice pad surfaces. Let's just see what that comes back with. But I think we should pause in terms of the operation of the pool because it's not safe. It's not safe. You're hearing this from around the room. It's not safe. Let's close the pool. Let's put those dollars away. If we have to close it for 5 years, until 5 years we have a replacement pool, that's $10 million just in operating costs that we could have towards that pool, that investment.
Thank you. So we've had a motion to close, we've had a motion to expend the funds unless there's a motion that's different than those two, or a motion to
I have a
reconsider.
question to staff.
Councillor Plummer?
Would there not be, seeing we can't come to an agreement tonight, would there not be a point where staff deems the pool to be structurally unsound, or someone makes the call, say, no, the pool cannot be basically open anymore because of concerns, therefore it is unclosed on a staff makes a decision on closing the pool?
Thank you, Councillor Plummer. Mr. Unruh?
So I think council's been given all the information, and I think that's a council's decision to close the pool, not staff.
Okay. A motion to reconsider to bring the same question back again. So we've had a motion to close and we've had the motion to expend the funds. And all I'm saying is unless there's a different motion or a motion to reconsider, which we can't even agree on the first two motions. Councillor Keel?
So, I mean, I think I'm the only one that kind of voted against both options, actually. We're about to have one hell of a budget round. I'm inclined to accept the deputy mayor and the mayor and Councillor Plummer's view that we might be able to reutilize or do something else with the Butler building. I appreciate that, and I'm not going to lie, I sat here and hemmed and hawed, but we were rushing to a vote. I can also appreciate if we went forward with buying a new Butler building for the 1.1 million, what is the timeline on that? And are we likely closing the pool before then I mean, I get what the CAO just said. It's a council decision. I'm not a structural engineer. I have no idea when the appropriate time to close this building is. So if we punt this to next month, when we're actually in budget and we actually know where this $1.1 million is coming from, because that's my problem right now. I think it was Mr. Lewis that said, we can repurpose it in that. Well, okay, I'm kind of on board to that idea if it keeps the pool open, and we need to do something for the next second year to fifth year before something new is built anyway. So I'm inclined to not closing the pool for 5 years. That's where I'm getting stuck, is I don't want to see the city without a pool for 5 years. But at the same time, I don't know if we have $1.1 million in this budget round. Because I got to tell you, I think this budget round with well, I don't want to go into it, but with certain increases that I believe are coming, with certain other capital projects that I know are needed, January is not going to be a fun month for any of us sitting around this table. So I don't want to say right now today that we're going to do 1.1 million and come to regret that literally 4 weeks from now. So my motion would be that we table this matter to budget and then discuss this question in budget, in which case I would be perfectly amenable to reevaluating the votes that we've already had. But I don't think this should be, I mean, and I'm not saying this to disrespect staff, but like, we got this report tonight. Like, I've been reading it while I've been sitting here. I don't want to make $1 million decision on the taxpayer's dime because of a piece of paper I got 2 hours ago. I now have a lot more questions to go with the questions that I submitted to staff last week. So I say we table this for budget. And at budget, this is obviously going to be a specific discussion. And I will be the first to admit that I think that's going to be the make or break moment. Like, we're not going to be able to punt this down the road after budget, but I think this is a budget, what's the word I'm looking for, Madam Treasurer? Like, this is a matter that, well, no, but this is a matter that will influence what we're doing with our budget. So I say we table it to the January meeting, that it come, I move that we postpone it to the budget meeting in January, so that we are in fact bringing it back, and that we make a decision in January during budget.
Motion to postpone, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Those in favor?
Yay.
And that carried then. Okay, thank you, and I think that's all unless staff want to weigh in on something else. Otherwise, I'm looking to the Deputy Mayor for confirming bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Troy.
And it just has to do with the safety in terms of the facility. We shouldn't leave the facility for saying recommendations from a consultant to say that anybody that's in the facility, that it should be monitored. So are we going to have confirmation in terms of that somebody's going to monitor it until such time that we bring it up at budget?
So a question of staff, this particular matter's tabled, but I'm going to allow, can you comment that you're going to continue to monitor?
Yeah, so through the chair, yeah, we can certainly look at monitoring it. I don't know if it's fair of staff directly to monitor it. I think we should have someone maybe coming into the facility. What I would suggest is, taking some time to digest that and coming back with an answer as to how we're going to do that, but we'll investigate it immediately.
Okay, fair enough.
Would we have time for that investigation prior to our next council meeting next week?
Yes.
Okay, so it'll come back next council meeting to discuss that particular point. Deputy Mayor, confirming bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Troy Purcell, that bylaw 28-2023 to confirm the proceedings of the special meeting of council of December 11th, 2023 be adopted and passed, and further, that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And Thank you. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Purcell, the bylaw 28-2023 to confirm the proceedings, special meeting of council of December 11, 2023 be adopted and passed, and further that said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Those in favor, that's carried. Motion to adjourn. I have the Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Keel. Those in favor, that's carried. We are adjourned. Thank you.